Late in the evening, a young lady walked leisurely through the old district of Ping'an. Gu Chu was the biological daughter of the main heroine of Cruel Romance. Gu Chu was once a genius hacker, but a year ago she was reincarnated in the lunar world. The world was filled with cruel drama, and she became the 5-year-old daughter of the main character, Gu Mansi. She knew that the scene had finally arrived, where the Zhao family would come to pick up the main character and take her home. Standing outside the door, the young lady overheard your relatives talking about her mother being kidnapped. Gu Mansi, the main character of the brutal novel, froze in shock when she heard something like this. Tang Chung-chu, the protagonist's biological mother, asked her daughter to return to the family with tears in her eyes. In the original story, after being kidnapped, the heroine accidentally ended up in a poor family. Her adoptive parents took good care of her, but in order to save her sick mother, she went to work in the entertainment industry. Song Chen noticed that the girl looked like his first love, and he offered to become her contractual mistress. Then, he gave her a large sum of money and made her his mistress. Soon she fell in love with a dangerous man. But in addition to the return of her first love and the serious illness of her adoptive mother, something else happened. She decided to leave the young man hiding her identity and running away with the child in her arms. She later gave birth to a beautiful daughter, Gu Chu. Gu Chu walked into the room with a smile and announced that she had returned to school. She smiled and said that she would like to eat milk pie, but she was ashamed to pretend to be a little girl, since she was an adult at heart. At that very moment, she asked her mother who had come to visit them. Gu Mansi said with a smile that her grandmother was visiting them. She smiled and greeted her grandmother. Madame looked at the girl with a smile. Gu Mansi smiled and said that this was her daughter. The madam looked at her daughter with tears in her eyes and said that the last years had not been easy for her, and she had been through a lot. She told her daughter that she would send a car to pick her up tomorrow so that they could return home. When leaving, the lady told her daughter that she didn't need to worry. She needed to prepare for the move. Gu Chu stared at her grandmother because she knew what kind of person she really was. A moment later, they said goodbye to Tang Chongshu. But at the very moment the door closed, Madame's face changed. She thought for a moment and said that she thought her grandmother was very strict. Gu Mansi smiled and told her daughter that her birth mother wanted them to return and be with their family. She also said that their family was quite famous in Beijing. Gu Chu asked her mother why grandma hadn't found them earlier. Gu Chu said that many years had passed and she only found them now. Gu Mansi told her daughter with a smile that a mother would never do anything bad to her child. She smiled and told her daughter that she didn't need to worry so much. The young lady was puzzled because she knew that her mother was too naive, so she easily fell into the traps. In the original story, Tang Chung-shu verbally wanted the family to be restored, but in reality, she just wanted to marry her daughter off to a fat, elderly rich man. Gu Mansi was deceived and forced into marriage, and soon tortured to death. And her little daughter died of hunger. She was puzzled because she knew she could not allow this tragedy to happen again. Looking at her mother, she understood that she had to save her. She understood that she had no one closer to her than her mother, so she wanted to do everything possible to ensure that they lived happily. She looked into the distance with a fierce grin because she knew that they would start acting tomorrow. The next day, the driver picked them up and told them that they could take a nap, as they still had a few hours to travel. Gu Chu asked the driver if her grandmother really loved her, and her mother. The man was taken aback and said with a smile that the lady was happy to find her child after many years, and everyone in the house was very happy about their return. Gu Chu asked if that was the case. Why didn't Grandma send a plane for them, since they could have gotten there faster with it? The man was taken aback and said that perhaps all the tickets were sold out, since tickets to the capital are very popular. Gu Mansi told her daughter that Grandma just decided to take them quietly so that they wouldn't attract too much attention. She was puzzled, as she had obviously been hinting to her mother, but she did not understand anything. Sometime later, they finally arrived at the Zhao family's house. After some time, they were escorted into the living room with a smile. Sometime later, they came to the living room, where all their relatives were. The madam looked at her daughter with a smile and greeted her, and also invited her to sit down. But she ignored her granddaughter. Chu knew that if her grandmother wanted to play, she would give her space to show her motherly love. She looked at everyone present with a grin, because I wanted to see who could be conquered. She saw Zhao Jing, the protagonist's father, but she knew that he was just trying to impress. Zhao Yan was the brother of the main character. She knew that in the novel, he was the only good person in their family. Chu knew that he would later become a billionaire, and a super successful businessman, so she wanted to hold on to him tighter. At that very moment, she approached him with a smile, but the young man was taken aback as he did not expect such a thing. She greeted him with a smile and asked him to hug her. He was taken aback because the girl's glowing eyes reminded him of someone. He asked her name with a smile. Chuchu immediately introduced herself and said that her name means first love. He smiled and said that she was very small, but she knew what first love was. She smiled and said that she heard about it on TV. Chuchu said that first love is the one who likes a person first, and she asked her uncle if he had such a love. He smiled and said that she had guessed correctly. She had not guessed correctly at all, because she knew all the information about the novel. His love was a popular streamer, and in the near future, his parents would forbid them from dating. Zhao entered their room, Manchi, the main character's younger sister. Zhao Manchi looked at her sister with a smile, because she knew that her life was hard. At that very moment, she asked her sister where her husband was, since she had only seen her daughter. Mansi said that her daughter's father had died early. Zhao Manchi told her sister with a smile that it must have been difficult for her all this time. At that very moment, Manchi felt a hidden hostility. Manchi asked her mother at that very moment if she had chosen a kindergarten. Madam said that she had chosen a kindergarten. The lady looked at her daughter with a smile and said that she had chosen the best garden, and it was reliable, so she did not need to worry. Manchi smiled and told her sister that her daughter was little and needed to interact more with her peers. They tried to persuade her for a while. She understood that her daughter was smart, but she needed to communicate more with their children. She looked closely at her daughter because she knew she shouldn't be sitting in the room playing computer games. Chuchu looked closely at her relatives as the kindergarten scene finally began. In the novel, her relatives pretended to the court that they had chosen an elite kindergarten for her with good intentions, but in reality, they wanted to separate their daughter and mother. Then they arranged a meeting between the main character and the fat old man, and the kindergarten was not at all elite and looked more like a torture chambers. In just a few days, the young girl became pale and emaciated from hunger. Tang Chungshu threatened and convinced her daughter that she would take her granddaughter out of kindergarten as soon as she married Mr. Li. The young lady in turn understood that the kindergarten was the beginning of a tragedy, and she had to stop them. At that very moment, she looked at her uncle and said, "She doesn't want your kindergarten." She hugged her uncle tightly and said that she wanted to play only with him. She hoped that her uncle understood her and would save her. Yan knew that his parents were greedy businessmen who cared only about profit, and his mother also despised women due to her bad reputation. He knew that his sister had been missing for many years, and his mother had never looked for her, but now she was showing care and attention, and it was too suspicious. He usually didn't interfere in family matters, but he knew that this time he would have to sort things out. Manchi said with a smile that she would take her niece to the room, and not while they talked. The young lady ran into the room with joy, as she liked it very much. Manchi looked at the girl with a satisfied smile, because she knew that village children were simple. After all, she had a few toys, and she was already glowing with happiness. Chuchu was a little puzzled that the room was in pink tones, because she was not a child at all. She liked completely different things. For example, unlimited money, a top-end computer, and a cool car. Manchi looked at the girl with a smile and asked if she knew who her father was. Chuchu looked around warily and told her aunt that she was about to tell her a secret, but she must not tell anyone. Chuchu, with a satisfied smile, quietly said to her aunt that according to her mother, her father was a diver. Manchi immediately thought that the man did not have a normal job. She smiled and asked the girl where her father was now. The lady smiled and said that her mother said that her father was the coolest diver in the world. And while others quickly emerged from the water, her father had not emerged for many years. Manchi was taken aback by this answer. She was furious because she realized that her sister had said some stupid answer to her daughter because she did not want to reveal the true identity of the biological father. As she left, she sighed heavily and told her niece to play, as she had some things to do. Chu thought for a moment because she knew that now it was her turn to show her mother that the kindergarten was a trap. After some time, she sat down at the computer. After some searching, she found all the information about the kindergarten. She knew that now she had to pretend that she wasn't the one who opened the site. Chu understood that the sooner they found the unfit father, the better it would be for her and her mother. Sometime later, she contacted her friends, But they did not believe her that she was preparing for kindergarten because they knew that she did not belong there. After some time, Madame looked in on her daughter and said that it was time for her to go to bed, but she still wanted to play. Mansi smiled and told her daughter that she could continue playing tomorrow. While her mother was picking her up, she accidentally clicked on the keyboard and opened the tab with the gardens. Mansi put her daughter to bed with a smile and said that she would turn off the computer and return to her. Mansi was glad that her daughter played happily all day long, but a moment later, she was taken aback and froze when she saw information about the kindergarten. At that very moment, she began to study the dossier on this establishment, but she was puzzled by everything she saw. She knew that it was her own mother who advised her to send her daughter to a similar kindergarten. She was shocked because she realized that during the day, her mother had praised the garden, and later she saw terrible news about it. Choo-choo, at that very moment, she asked her mother with a smile whether adults really liked to play on the computer since her aunt played with it, and asked about her father. Mansi immediately understood why the tab about the kindergarten was open, but she was puzzled and did not understand why they wanted to know about her daughter's father. She immediately asked her daughter what exactly her aunt had said. Choo-choo was glad that her mother had finally turned on her brain. Choo-choo said that her aunt said that she was a pathetic brat and that she was interfering with their family's plans. But at that very moment, she smiled and asked her mother what the word offspring meant in the most innocent tone. Mansi was taken aback by this information because she did not expect anything like this. She knew she had a knack for exaggerating and embellishing a little, but she also knew that no one would think a small child could be mean. Mansi smiled and told her daughter to go to bed and not think about anything, as her mother would not allow anyone to hurt her. The young lady wished her mother sweet dreams with a smile. At the same time, Madame with Mr. Li, to whom she sent photographs of her eldest daughter. The gentleman said with a joyful smile that everything suited him and that they would soon become relatives. I was very happy with his words. She said that in that case, she would arrange a meeting for them, and after that, they would be one. A moment later, her daughter joined her and said with a smile that the master would be suitable for her sister. But at that same moment, Madame told her daughter that it was time for her to also think about marriage. She smiled and said she had one option in mind, and he was an entertainment mogul. She happily said that he was single and very handsome. The lady said with a smile that this candidate was suitable for her, and later they could arrange a meeting so that they could get to know each other better. The next day, the lady told her daughter that she would take her granddaughter to kindergarten, and her daughter could, in the meantime, go to her father's company to get acquainted with the business. Mansi told her mother that she would also like to go to kindergarten with her daughter. The lady smiled and said that she didn't need to go there, and that she would sort out the matter herself, and that it would be better for her to head to the company. At that very moment, a young gentleman joined them and said that he himself would take his niece to the garden. He smiled and said that he just had some free time after yesterday he was restless and therefore wanted to sort everything out. At that moment, the lady was taken aback and told her son that he had a lot of work and he shouldn't do such things. But a few moments later, everyone was taken aback when they heard a scream. Mansi ran upstairs at that very moment because she heard her daughter scream. She rushed into the room and was taken aback because she saw her daughter lying on the ground and she was wounded. Choo-choo screamed and burst into tears because her leg hurt so much. Mansi was taken aback and told everyone present that this was not at all what they thought. But at that very moment, Mansi pushed her sister away and ran to her daughter as she wanted to immediately take her to the doctor. The young gentleman looked closely at everyone present and asked what had really happened. His sister was taken aback, not knowing what to answer. She said that she woke up her niece and Ta wanted her to carry her in her arms, but her arms suddenly started to hurt. And then a vase fell from the shelf right on the girl. Choo-choo said with tears in her eyes that it was her own fault and they should not scold their aunt. Mansi sighed heavily and said that it was her fault since she could not keep an eye on her daughter. Her sister was in shock. At that very moment, the young gentleman said that they needed to take the girl to the nearest hospital as shrapnel could have gotten into the wound. The madame told her daughter that even if she didn't like her niece, she shouldn't do that to her, but her daughter screamed that it was just an accident. The lady said that she should apologize after they returned and that she should also clean the room, but she screamed that she did not want to harm the child. While they were driving to the hospital, Jan asked his niece if it was an accident. The young lady, bursting into tears, said that it all happened by chance. She wanted her uncle to ask her more questions because she wanted to show him her acting skills. Jan sighed and told his niece to tell the truth and not to be afraid because her uncle could protect her. Mansi. She looked at her daughter and asked if she had really done something similar herself. Chuchu knew that her mother was naive and fell into her family's trap every time, but she didn't want her mother to get hurt. At that very moment, she shouted that she was afraid to tell the truth, and if she told her mother would stop loving her. Chuchu cried out with tears in her eyes that her aunt had insulted her and thrown her on the floor, and also said that she was a bastard. Mansi was shocked by everything she heard. The lady was puzzled because in her past life she had not cried at all, but today she had cried all her tears for several lives. Mansi was furious because her daughter was called an illegitimate child. They talked about a new father. She understood that her family was not so hospitable. At that moment, she looked at her brother and asked if he was in cahoots with the others. He sighed heavily and said that he had no intention of harming her. After some time, all the young lady's wounds were treated. Mansi told her brother that she had found out about the garden, but according to her information, it was the worst. She knew that if her daughter had not gotten hurt today, her mother would have taken the girl to kindergarten. With tears in her eyes, she said that she had made a mistake and that she should not have returned to her family since they despised her. Yan told his sister that it would be better for her not to return home anytime soon, and it would be nice if she stayed at his house for a while. She agreed at that very moment, but knew that as soon as her daughter recovered, she would immediately take her back to the village. But a moment later, she saw that her mother was calling her brother, advised her not to quarrel with her mother, as it would be difficult for her to leave the city after the quarrel. She agreed, and at the same moment turned on the phone to talk to her mother. The lady was very worried and said that they had removed all the sharp objects. Immediately, the daughter told her mother that they would remain in the hospital. The lady told her daughter that it would be better this way, but still said that her relatives knew that she had returned and therefore wanted to meet. Mansi coldly replied to her mother that they would talk about this meeting later, since she had to look after her daughter. Madame was puzzled and understood that it would be difficult for her to prepare a meeting between her daughter and Mr. Li, since her daughter suspected something. The next day, they arrived at Jan's house, and he hurriedly showed them everything. At that very moment, the young lady saw a small and beautiful room. She smiled and asked if he really liked cartoon characters, since there were a lot of toys in the room. He smiled and said that this room belonged to one of his friends, and he came to him periodically. She smiled and said that she understood everything, and also reported that some aunt lived in the room. She knew the room was for his streamer lover, but when his family found out about their relationship, they killed her. Mansi smiled and told her daughter not to say such nonsense, but she only laughed in response. Jan looked at his family with a smile and said that he still had business companies to attend to, so he needed to go and they could rest for now. Chuchu said goodbye to her uncle with a joyful smile. Mansi told her daughter that she would go to kindergarten, and in the meantime, she should quietly sit at home and not be naughty. Mansi understood perfectly well that she couldn't trust anyone, and that she needed to gather all the information herself. Sometime later, she left the house and headed towards the garden, but after a few minutes, she stopped, because she saw that some car had driven up to her. At that very moment, she saw her mother with a joyful smile. Madame said that she was looking for her daughter, because her uncle wanted to meet her. She said that he was very happy when he heard the news that she was back, so she should meet all her relatives today. Mansi was puzzled, because she intended to go to the garden, but Madame immediately told her daughter that she would like to improve the relationship between them. She said that they were of the same flesh and blood, and hoped that their relationship would soon improve. The girl was taken aback, as she did not expect such a thing. But the lady did not give in, and forcibly pushed her daughter into the car. Sometime later, the young lady finished all her business and decided to rest a little. At that very moment, she looked at her watch and realized that a lot of time had passed, and her mother had not yet returned. But a moment later, she was taken aback as she realized the seriousness of the whole situation. She started calling her mother in a hurry, but the phone was unavailable. She was puzzled as she realized that everything was lost. At that very moment, she remembered the original and realized that right now, her so-called family would put her mother in bed with a pervert. At that very moment, she called her uncle. With tears in her eyes, she said that her mother went to kindergarten but still hasn't returned. He was taken aback and said that she didn't need to worry and that he would come quickly. Chuchu was furious because she was a little child, because she couldn't do anything, According to the original, Madame will bring a crowd of people into the room and pretend to have caught her daughter with the gentleman in bed. Manxi's reputation will be completely destroyed, and she will be forced to marry Mr. Lee under pressure. Choo-choo hoped that they would make it in time, and nothing like this would happen. Sometime later, she visited the hotel with her uncle, and the man told the gentleman that they had found traces of his family. He told his niece that he would go look for her mother, and she should stay in the car. The young lady in turn agreed with her uncle with a smile and stared after him for a while. Jan was furious because he didn't know what his mother and sister were doing in the same hotel. A moment later, the young lady got out of the car with ease, as she knew that children should not be left unattended in a car. She was well aware that this was very dangerous. She in turn knew where her mother was, so she wanted to find her before everyone else. But to her regret, she was very small and could not do everything that ordinary people did. With her last strength, she reached for the button, but a moment later, she saw someone enter the elevator. The young lady was taken aback as she immediately recognized the man who was next to her. She was shocked because she knew that in front of her was the very hero of the original novel, namely her hapless father. At that very moment, the man asked the girl with a smile why she was alone in the elevator. She knew that in order for her father to find love quickly, she would have to take a risk. With tears in her eyes, she said that she wanted to go to the very top and find her mother, but she could not press the button in the elevator. She looked at the tall uncle with a gentle smile and asked if he had seen her mother. Everyone was immediately taken aback. The young man asked the girl to let the director go, as he was very squeamish, and he also said that he would quickly press the button for her. Choo-choo thanked them with a smile for their help, but in turn, she was very angry since she was his own daughter, and he was blind as a mole and saw nothing. In the original story, he accidentally fell into the water, but was rescued. He thought he was saved by the villain Chung Ching-yun. That's why he idolized her. And for this reason, he caused unimaginable pain to the main character. When she read this novella, she was amazed at his blindness and lack of understanding. As he left the elevator, he told his assistant to bring him a new suit. The young lady in turn was furious. She knew that she would get even with him later, and for the fact that he ignored her, he would get it in full. But still, after a few minutes, she reached the desired floor. She wondered if her uncle had found her mother, but at that very moment, she felt someone approaching her. Choo-choo turned around happily because she thought her uncle had approached hers. But a moment later, she was dumbfounded because she saw a young man. He looked at her intently and asked where her mother was. At that very moment, she burst into tears and said that she was looking for her mother and could not find her. He was taken aback and wondered if he was too late. At that very moment, a young man ran up to them and told the gentleman that they had figured everything out and found the number. Choo-choo looked at the boy closely because she knew him. He was drawn into a power struggle and died at the hands of one of his father's illegitimate children. As he left, he told his subordinate to look after the child. She thought for a moment, as it seemed to her that the young man wanted to save her mother, but she understood that they were completely unrelated to each other. He was puzzled and rushed towards the girl at full speed, but at the same time he did not understand why she listened to her mother. At that very moment, he burst into the room and called her. Mansi, in turn, lying in bed, pushed the man away and screamed. He kissed her lustfully and told her that there was no need for her to leave. At that very moment, he got what he deserved as the young man kicked him in anger. And so the man fell to the ground with a roar. He was furious and did not understand how the young man dared to interfere with them. The young man calmed the lady and said that she was now safe. Chung Chi-shi looked at the man with rage and said that he would kill him. Mr. Lee was immediately taken aback because when he saw who was in front of him, he understood that he should not get involved with him. Mr. Lee hurriedly said that it was a misunderstanding and that it was his wife in trouble, but Choo-choo immediately burst into the room and called her mother. The young man looked at the man, and he was taken aback. Mansi called her daughter with tears in her eyes. Choo-choo hugged her mother and said that she missed her very much. Choo-choo quickly looked at her mother and realized that they had made it in time, and the man had not done anything to her. Bursting into tears, she told her daughter that she also missed her. She was furious because her own mother had deceived her. Choo-choo smiled and told her mother not to cry, because she would give her apple pie later. At that very moment, the man was taken aback because he saw that she had a child. He realized that he had been deceived. Chung Chi immediately approached the man and angrily asked if he had any objections. Manxi looked at the young man closely and thanked him, and also said that she would repay him. He looked at her in surprise and asked if she didn't remember him. At that very moment, they turned around as they heard the voice of the madam, whom I was saying that her daughter had deliberately started an affair with the gentleman in order to get money. She said that her daughter came from a remote village, saw a rich man, and decided to grab hold of him. Mansi turned around menacingly and looked intently at her mother. At that moment, Madam was taken aback, as she had not expected anything like this at all. Jan walked up to his sister and asked if she was okay. As he was worried, Chu-Chu smiled and told her uncle that she had found her mother first. He looked at her in surprise and said that he asked her to stay in the car and wait for him. At that very moment, the young man looked at his assistant and told him to call the police, because there had been an attack on a woman in the room and there were witnesses to it. The man immediately shouted that he had been set up because the lady had said that she wanted to marry her eldest daughter to him, but he intended to sleep with his bride, and that was not a crime. Chu-Chu asked her mother in surprise if she was really the nasty uncle's fiancée. She immediately said that she didn't like him because he looked like a pig and she didn't like pork. The man was furious and asked the girl who she called a fat pig. Mansi told her daughter that this was not her future father at all, but she had to go home and wait for her there. Mansi gave her daughter to her brother and asked him to take her away because she did not want her daughter to see such dirty scenes. Madame smiled and said that since everything had been resolved and they had found her, it was time for them to leave. Chung-Chi immediately asked angrily if they were really going to leave without explaining what had happened. Cheng-Chi Grosno said that he was checking the quality of the hotel's infrastructure. Today passed by a room and heard cries for help, and when he opened the door, he discovered that an act of violence was taking place in the hotel. He told the man to wait for the police to arrive. He also advised Mansi to take a blood test because it was possible that she drank something forbidden. She agreed because she was forced to drink water. The madam was taken aback and shouted to her daughter that she had done this voluntarily since she herself wanted to marry a rich man. She shouted at her daughter not to call the police because it was their family matter. She could not allow her reputation to suffer. Mansi asked her mother if she considered her a daughter since she drank the water she brought her and felt ill. Mansi screamed and told her mother that she herself said that they were going to visit relatives, but in fact she brought her to a stranger. She was furious because her mother took her back to use her. Mr. Lee said that he was also deceived. The lady witch reported that her daughter loved men who were similar to him, so he came into the room. At that very moment, the family elder asked the young master not to call the police, as it was just a misunderstanding. He said with a smile that they could discuss this situation within the family circle, since they made concessions when they found out that she had an illegitimate daughter, and she could make concessions to them and not make a fuss. Mansi angrily asked the elder if the interests of the family were so important to him. Why didn't he marry his granddaughter to the master? The man was taken aback and did not answer. Chung-Chi looked at her closely and wondered if she was really that good at acting or if he had the wrong person. A little earlier, he was informed that Mansi had come to the hospital with her daughter, who had been injured. He was angry that she couldn't take care of her child and couldn't protect him. Chung-Chi tracked the IP address, and it pointed to Manxi's house. He knew that there was only one person in this world who was capable of such a high level of hacking, but he saw before him only a soft, naive, and simple lady, and she was not at all like the one he was looking for. Manxi sighed heavily and told the young master to call the police. The madam was taken aback and rushed to her daughter. She shouted that they were one family, and she could not treat them like that, because in this way she would ruin her name and reputation. Mansi was furious. She understood that Madame was completely unworthy of being her mother. At that very moment, the young gentleman told his assistant to call the police. After everything that happened, Jan informed his sister that Mr. Lee was accused of attempted crime and would serve no more than a month in prison. She was puzzled because she knew she had no power to fight him, but now she knew what her family was like. She also told her brother that as soon as the daughter's wound healed, they would go to the village, but he informed her that their house had already been sold. She was shocked that her family sold her own house. She didn't understand how they could help someone do something like that. Jan said that they could stay with him for a while, and he would hire guards for them. And when everything calmed down, he would think about how to send them to a safe place. She looked at her brother in surprise and asked why he had such a difficult relationship with his family. He said that the family does a lot of dirty deeds, and he doesn't like it. His father was greedy. His mother secretly had another man, and his sister was cunning, but liked to pretend to be unhappy. Choo-Choo quietly listened to their conversation, but at the same time, she realized that they had gotten off too easily, and she would soon correct their punishment. At the same time, the spouses quarreled very strongly, since the head of the family blamed his wife for all the troubles. But she said they could try another option, since their daughter-like Song Chenjing said their marriage was simply impossible. But at that very moment, their conversation was interrupted as the young man reported that something terrible had happened. After all, a lot of revelations about Mr. Li's company suddenly appeared on the internet, and he was arrested. They were shocked since their business was closely connected with Mr. Li. The lady shouted that they could settle the question, but the young man said that too much information had already leaked, and it was simply impossible. She was furious and shouted that he should explain who had leaked everything, but her husband assured her that it was useless to look for the informant. At that very moment, as he was leaving, he shouted that it was necessary to immediately call a meeting of the company's shareholders and cut off all ties with the gentleman. Madame was puzzled, as she understood that this was too strange a coincidence. She knew that her daughter did not have such connections and influence, so she assumed that most likely it was a coincidence. At the same time, the young gentleman was monitoring the source, which had become active again, as a huge number of scandals had been published. At that moment, he was taken aback, because he saw that the signal was from the western region. He knew that Mansi and her daughter were currently living there temporarily. He was puzzled, because the last time the signal came from the city where Mansi used to live. But he knew she didn't look anything like the person he was looking for, so he wondered if she was just pretending. His fall into the book, he tried to track her down for several years, thinking that it was a man, but she outwitted him. He discovered that she was a woman hiding under a male alias. Now he wanted to know where she was, since the young lady had captured his heart. At that moment, the young master was informed that Qing Kaiyuan has started to act again, and perhaps the Lord will be his next target. But the young gentleman calmly told his assistant to hire people to punch him in the face. The young man was surprised and happy, because after the kidnapping, his master became a different person. He was decisive and cruel, but at the same time, he brought all the uncooperative members of the family into order, and this was simply incredible on his part. At the same time, the young lady was happily reaping the fruits of her hard work. As she had leaked the information, the network and the family's reputation were destroyed. She was glad that she could finally relax a little. But after a few days, she realized that this was not the case. She was a little puzzled as she was brought into the garden, and the young man was happily asking them questions. He smiled and said that whoever answered correctly would receive a red flower. At that very moment, all the children began to give their answers. And at the same time, the young lady was puzzled, because this was not a kindergarten hell for her. She was furious because she had to go through everything. At that very moment, the young man looked at her with a smile and asked a question. Yasichin supported his neighbor with a smile and said that she would succeed. At that very moment, she looked at the teacher and gave the correct answer. All the children were delighted that she answered correctly. They couldn't stop praising her. Choo-Choo was puzzled and wanted to grow up quickly so as not to go to that stupid kindergarten. After a while, the young lady woke up and was a little confused as she knew that today was a day off. But she did not understand why there was so much noise in the house. She saw a note that her mother was at an emergency meeting, but that her nanny would drop by soon and cook her lunch. The young lady, in turn, slowly went down to the kitchen. But after a few moments, one interesting room caught her attention. Choo-Choo was taken aback because she saw a stranger, but it was just Lin Xiaozhou, who was also a streamer. At that very moment, he rushed to the girl as he realized that she was his eldest niece. But he was amazed as he realized that his friend had not lied to him, and she really was like a kitten. He smiled and said that if he had known that she was so charming, he would not have gone to meet her, but would have come straight to her. He greeted her with a smile and introduced himself, but at the same time he asked her a lot of questions. She looked at him puzzled and wondered if he could just keep quiet for a little while. At that very moment, she said that she wanted to eat. He looked at her with a contented smile, as she seemed very sweet to him. He looked at the girl with a smile and invited her to go into the kitchen. Xiaozhou said with a smile that she could call him brother. Choo-Choo smiled and asked him if he loved her uncle. He said with a smile that her uncle was like a brother to him and he loved him. She smiled and said that the fight in kindergarten. They were told that two people can love each other. She smiled and said that in that case they could get married. The young man was taken aback, as he did not expect anything like that. At that very moment, he burst into laughter and said that it was just brotherly love. He said with a smile that love comes in different forms, and his love is brotherly affection, not romantic feelings. Choo-Choo looked at him intently, because she knew that the original story had a tragic ending. Her uncle cared for the young man as if he were a younger brother, but tried not to show his feelings. At that very moment, he sat her on his shoulders and said with a smile that they could play. She immediately agreed. After some time, he happily showed her computer games. Xiaozhou's smile said that they should keep it a secret, so that her uncle wouldn't find out. Yan entered their room and asked what they were doing. The young people were taken aback, as they did not expect that they would be exposed so quickly. Xiaozhou said that they weren't doing anything like that, and he also said that the annual streamer meeting was coming up soon, and he wanted to go shopping for some new clothes. He smiled and told his friend that he could not leave the child at home alone, and therefore she could go with them. Choo-Choo said with a smile that she would not go, because her mother said that the nanny would come soon and cook her lunch. She didn't want to interfere or be superfluous in their company. Yan smiled and told his niece that in that case, she should stay at home and listen to the nanny. After some time, they said goodbye to the young lady and went shopping. At that very moment, she noticed that someone was filming the young people on camera. She knew that in the novel, her relatives were unhappy that her uncle had a friend, and since they did not accept their relationship, they tried to break them up. At the same moment, a singer appeared who accused Xiaozhou of harassment and even published a fake correspondence. He justified himself, but no one believed him, and everyone shouted at him to leave show business. No matter how much he said, no one believed him, and his streaming platform immediately announced that they were terminating his contract. Other brands also began to terminate contracts with him, but there was the last straw that broke him. It was a distraught ex-fan who inflicted a severe injury on the young man, so he could no longer play, and for him, it was a disaster. At that time, Yan was specially sent on a business trip abroad, and he was unable to return in time and help his friend. In the end, out of despair, he committed suicide. She watched them closely because she knew that her new acquaintance was a good person, so she wanted to help him. She simply could not leave her uncle without his only friend, because she was counting on his inheritance. At the same time, the spouses received evidence of the friendship of the young people, and they became furious. They now understood why he was not interested in any of the girls they offered him. They didn't know if there was really something between them, but they understood that the young people needed to be separated. The lady with a grin told her husband to calm down and think it over. Sometime later, the young people went on a business trip. Mansi told her daughter that the business trip would only be for a few days. She asked her daughter to listen to her brother and not run away. The young lady agreed with her mother and also asked her with a smile to eat on time. Mansi looked at her daughter tenderly and said that everything would be fine, and she didn't need to worry. Yan looked closely at his friend and said that if anything was needed, he could turn to his assistant for help. Xiaozhou told his friend that the child would be fine because he could handle it. Yan was puzzled by the fact that he was sent on a business trip, and he felt uneasy. The young lady immediately reassured her uncle and said with a smile that she would take care of her brother. For some time, they had a cheerful and relaxed conversation. A moment later, they finally said goodbye. The young lady, in turn, looked intently at her uncle, who was glowing with happiness. She also looked at her new brother, as she did not want the tragedy to happen to him again. She looked at them intently, because she knew that she would do everything possible to prevent something like this from happening. Xiaozhou smiled and told the young lady that there would be a meeting tomorrow. He asked if she wanted to come with him. She agreed at that very moment, since she intended not just to go, but to stage a whole performance. The next evening, a huge crowd gathered at the annual streamer convention venue, eager to see their idols. The young lady looked into the distance at all the fans, as she realized that her brother was very popular. She knew his fans adored him, but she understood that once the dirty married scandal came to light, they would also become the reason for his death. She saw how everyone greeted him with joy, but she knew it was just a fake. After some time, they were sitting in the banquet hall, and the young man told the girl to sit still while he went away. At that very moment, a girl approached them, greeted them with a smile, and also asked whose little girl was present at the banquet. At that moment, Choo-Choo looked at the girl with a predatory gaze as her target had arrived. Bai Yi was a popular streamer, but at the same time, she accused the young man of harassment. He smiled and said that this was his dear friend's niece. At that moment, Bai Yi began to communicate with the girl with a smile. She said that the girl was a good girl since she went to kindergarten. Choo-Choo smiled and asked if Auntie hadn't gone to kindergarten. At that very moment, the young man covered her mouth and told his friend not to be offended by the girl because she was just a child. At that very moment, a young man approached them and said that the interview would soon begin, and therefore he should join them. He looked at the gentleman with a smile and said that he could give him the phone while he was at the interview. Choo-Choo immediately told her brother that she would like to play a game. He smiled and immediately gave her the phone. The young man was a little puzzled and said that the girl might lose the phone. Xiaozhou said with a smile that nothing bad would happen, and he also asked her to wait for him. The young people were puzzled. They didn't know what to do now. Choo-Choo looked at them with a grin as she saw them exchanging glances. She knew that they intended to steal the phone and send out a harassing message. At that very moment, the girl reached out to the girl as she wanted to take the phone. Choo-Choo knew she wouldn't give up the phone that easily, but at that moment, she saw her father. She looked at him intently as she already had another plan in mind. At that very moment, she jumped off the sofa and ran to her father. She quickly grabbed his leg and said with a smile that they met again. Choo-Choo smiled and said that she met her mother, but other people wanted to offend her, and then they were put in prison. Bai Yi immediately ran up to them and took the young lady away and also asked for forgiveness. The assistant director looked closely at the girl and said that she should be vigilant as there were a lot of people at this event. Bai Yi sighed heavily as she saw that children were a complete headache. At that very moment, the young lady handed the girl the phone and asked if she could support him. Bai Yi was shocked that the girl gave the phone away herself, but she happily accepted it. Choo-Choo smiled and said that she would go to the toilet for a short while. She looked into the distance with a grin because she knew that at this time, her brother was finishing the interview. She knew that in the novel, he had a severe attack of gastritis and fell unconscious, but he could not call anyone for help. She knew that she would save him no matter what happened, and at that very moment, she rushed to him. She wanted to help him restore his good name. At the same time, the young man and his assistant were sorting out their affairs. But at that very moment, they were taken aback as they heard a knock at the door. At the same time, the young lady with tears in her eyes asked to call a doctor. Chengqi told the assistant to carry the man into the house and wipe the floor. At that very moment, he came out and asked the girl in surprise what had happened. She screamed that her brother had a severe stomach ache and had fainted, but no one could call for help. At that moment, she was taken aback as she smelled blood, but she understood that she should not say anything about it. Chengqi looked at the girl and said that she didn't need to worry because he would quickly call an ambulance and send him to their family hospital. Sometime later, sitting next to the young man, they waited for the ambulance to arrive. Moments later, the nurse announced that the young man would most likely only come to his senses tomorrow. Choo-Choo immediately noticed the camera and said that if they didn't keep an eye on her brother, his company would think that he was skipping work. At that very moment, she looked at her brother and with tears in her eyes asked him to turn on the camera. He sighed heavily and ordered the nurse to turn on the camera. The lady immediately beamed with happiness and thanked him. She was glad that her plan worked because if he hadn't agreed, she would have found another way, but she was still glad that everything happened so easily. He looked closely at the young lady as he saw that she looked naive, but inside, she had everything in order. At that moment, he was taken aback and wondered if the little child was the attack he was looking for. The young man told his accomplice with a smile to play her part well tomorrow. She immediately assured him that everything would go according to plan. She understood that a storm would soon begin that would engulf the entire internet because she intended step by step to enter the top ratings and marry a rich husband. The next day, the young lady saw that the entire internet was seething over the affair with her brother-in-law, and he was still lying unconscious. At that very moment, a young man unexpectedly entered the new room, and she was taken aback. He looked at Choo-Choo closely and said that the young man was feeling better and that she shouldn't worry. She looked at her brother and with tears in her eyes said that Mom and Uncle weren't picking up the phone and her brother was still in the hospital. She was scared. Chengqi looked closely at the girl because after her game, he was convinced that the person in front of him was needed. Chengqi said with a smile that she didn't need to be afraid or worried, and they would talk when the young man woke up. At that very moment, he asked what dishes her mother liked. She gave him a sincere answer and asked why he asked. He was taken aback and said with embarrassment that he was just asking. He was embarrassed when she called him brother. She looked at him in surprise as she didn't understand what had happened at all. But at that very moment, she realized that he was embarrassed, and when he saved her mother at the hotel, he was also embarrassed and unhappy with what she was doing. She was shocked and wondered if the young man had secretly fallen in love with her mother. She knew that her mother had only recently arrived in their city, and they simply had not been able to see each other anywhere before. Chengchi said with a smile that the young man had been the target of a planned attack on the internet, and they had to help him. Chu-Chu looked at him closely as she found him a little suspicious. He asked where brother's phone was. Chu-Chu said that she went to the toilet and put Baiyi's phone there. He thought about it because he knew that all the cameras had been turned off at the meeting for security purposes, and they couldn't prove that she was the one who took the phone. But at that very moment, he looked intently at the girl and called her. She was taken aback, as she did not expect him to call her, as she was immersed in her thoughts. At that moment, she smiled and asked what they should do now. Chengchi froze for a moment, because as soon as he imagined that she was trying to be nice, he suddenly felt funny. He didn't understand how such a bold and insolent person could descend to pretense, because she pretended to be a sweet and innocent child. At that very moment, he said that she didn't need to worry, because he had opportunities to help his brother, and as soon as he woke up, they would discuss everything. He smiled and said that he had things to do, so if she was bored, he could ask someone to bring her a laptop. She happily shouted that she wanted to play. "My main love is my laptop." She was glad that her brother understood her well. She wanted him to drive away her useless father and become her stepfather. Sometime later, she finally got hold of the laptop, and while corresponding with her comrades, asked them to hack one platforms. She was also told that there would soon be a world hacker competition abroad, and the prize there was very good. She knew that she had to participate in it as she needed money. A moment later, she saw that her little brother had woken up. The young man was puzzled, as he did not understand what had happened and where he was. At that very moment, she reported that something bad had happened, and people were saying on the internet that he had harassed the girl. He was shocked because after reading the message, he realized that it was not his at all. He did not understand how something like this could happen. At that very moment, he said that he would immediately call his director in order to resolve this issue. But when he called the director, he only attacked him with fury. The director was furious because the young man had caused a lot of losses to the company due to his actions. The man shouted at the young man that he would not get off so easily because he had crossed someone he shouldn't have. Chu-Chu looked closely at her brother and asked if he was okay. He was shocked because when he ran away from his parents, he dedicated his life to his hobby, but he didn't think that everything would end so sadly. He said he wanted to be discharged and said he would take her to Aunt Chu. Chu said he couldn't leave because he had bleeding in his stomach. At that very moment, Chengchi came to their room and told the young man that he had not yet recovered. Chengchi looked at his brother with a smile and said that he didn't need to worry as he was going to sign a contract with him. The young man was puzzled as he realized that he now had a terrible reputation. Chengchi immediately assured that everything had already been settled. At the same time, the director gave his employee a text that she had to learn because they intended to play out this situation well. A young man burst in and told them that another company was signing a contract with Xiaochu and was even willing to pay the fine for terminating his contract with them. Baiyi was shocked because she didn't expect anything like this. The young man also informed the director that the Red Pike had already published video from cameras showing that the young man was unconscious. She was shocked because she didn't expect him to be caught on camera. She knew she couldn't let him reveal the truth. Yan sighed heavily and sat down to rest for a bit as he didn't understand why it was necessary to hold such a long meeting. But at that very moment, Mansi ran up to her brother and reported urgent news. Mansi told her brother the not very pleasant news that his friend was accused of harassment and was still in the hospital. Yan was puzzled as he had felt before the trip that something was wrong. He was furious because he assumed that it was a trap set by his parents. After all, they deliberately lured him out of the country in order to attack his friend. At that very moment, he turned around and informed his sister that they were going back immediately. After some time, the young people visited the hospital. Xiaozhou told his friend not to worry as he felt fine. The young people talked among themselves for some time and came to the conclusion that the child needed to be removed from the hospital and sent to kindergarten. The young lady was shocked, but her mother said that she had already missed several days and needed to catch up. She was in shock and burst into bitter tears as she wanted to stay in the hospital. Xiaozhou smiled and told his friend that he would like to take a short walk as he was bored of sitting in the ward every day. While walking, the young man told his friend that he had already signed a contract with another platforms. Xiaozhou said with a smile that he would be able to be discharged in a few days, and everything would be fine. Yan was glad to hear this. At the same time, a crazy fan was watching them from the bushes. At that very moment, he attacked them with fury, as he did not understand how the young man dared to harm his goddess. The young men were taken aback, but Yan quickly reacted and protected his friend, putting his hand under the blow. The man was furious. He shouted at the young man to immediately apologize to his beloved Bai Yi because he had caused her so much harm. Xiaozhou was shocked as his friend was injured and his hand was bleeding. He glared at the man who had just caused his elder such incredible pain. Without wasting a moment, Xiaozhou grabbed the broom and pounced on the fan. Xiaozhou beat him furiously without mercy because he could not understand how he dared to injure his elder. At that very moment, the man with tears in his eyes asked the young man to stop. He also reported that the girl in her stream said that he had falsified the recordings in order to slander her. Xiaozhou shouted at the man to sit and wait for the police Yan. At the same time, he was thinking about the man's words, since the same girl was involved in this case again. The next day, they sat and watched the news about the case. Xiaozhou was puzzled because he knew that the girl had failed to slander him and had sent her fan to hurt him. Chu looked closely at her uncle, as she now understood why he had been so busy lately. At that moment, the young man said that today he was invited to the filming of an advertisement, so he wanted to take Chu with him because she could see how the filming was going. At that very moment, she shouted that she would go with pleasure. Her mother smiled and said that they would all go together. After some time, they all visited the film studio, and the young lady called out to her brother with a joyful smile. At that very moment, she turned around and called her mother, because I enjoyed the beautiful view despite the weather. But after a moment, she stopped because she saw a familiar silhouette. She looked at the heir of the Qing family in surprise, as she didn't understand what he was doing in a place like this. At that moment, she was taken aback and wondered if he was at the film studio because of her mother. The young man approached them and greeted them, and also asked how they were doing. Mancy said with a smile that they were doing well, and also thanked them for their help at the hotel. He smiled and said that it was his duty. Chu looked at the young man, as she knew that he had his eye on her mother. At that very moment, the young man looked at the girl and asked if she liked eclairs. He presented her with a whole box of treats and said with a smile that he had bought various goodies, especially for her. She smiled and thanked him. Chu knew perfectly well that he just wanted to bribe her, but she still ate them with pleasure. After some time, the young man was already in makeup preparing for the filming of an advertisement. Chu followed the conversation, heard a familiar name, and realized that they were talking about the sweet but doomed supporting character from the original novel. Her mother once entered the world of show business under a different name, and at the beginning of her career, she was noticed by a wonderful director. At that time, she even managed to star in a luxurious film. The director was inspired by her image, and her debut immediately became a sensation. She had a talented director, great skills and stunning looks, and if she had followed this path, she would certainly have become the youngest winner of the Best Actress award. At that very moment, a man approached them and said that the actress who was supposed to be filming the commercial had said that she had urgent business and had refused to shoot. The man apologized to the young man as he realized that filming would be interrupted without the lead actress. But at that very moment, he turned around and was taken aback. He looked at the young lady with admiration, as she was incredible. At that very moment, he rushed to her and asked if she could try on the image of the main character for their commercial. She smiled and asked for forgiveness, as she did not want to take part in the filming, as she did not like to appear in public. For some time, everyone present tried to persuade her to take off. At that moment, Chu looked at her mother intently and said with a smile that she wanted to see her in a similar image. She knew that her mother did not want her father to find them, but she, on the contrary, wanted it in the original. Because of his stupidity, he looked for them for a long time. At that very moment, they all looked at her intently, and with burning but pleading eyes, they supported this idea. She sighed heavily and agreed with them. Mancy, looking at everyone present, said that she would not take a fee, but wanted her face not to be shown. After some time, the young lady was already fully armed. Everyone looked at her with admiration, as it seemed to them that she had come down from heaven to them. Chu ran up to her mother with a joyful smile, as she was incredibly beautiful. A few days later, the commercial was ready. The man really wanted to tell his teacher about his achievement. At that very moment, He went to his teacher, led her with a file, but at the same time his teacher was in the desert. The man said that he was a little busy, but he still opened this file and was immediately taken aback. He was shocked because he saw a painfully familiar silhouette. Lu Shenhe was shocked and didn't expect that the girl would come back into his life like this. At the same time, the CEO froze for a moment as he saw the advertisement. He was shocked because he knew that there was only one woman in the world with such a graceful and slender figure. Songchen knew that only she could transform a simple image into a work of art. At that very moment, he shouted to his subordinate to find out everything about the advertisement and the girl. He was shocked because she was in the capital and he knew nothing about it. He understood that he urgently needed to find her. Sometime later, the young people arrived at the address where the young lady lived. At that very moment, the young man tidied himself up as he wanted to meet her in a proper form. He knew that everything was fine because he was just the perfect man. At that moment, he was taken aback because he heard a familiar voice. She looked at the security guard with a smile and said that she was going about her business. The young man was taken aback as he realized that in front of him was indeed the girl he had been looking for. He was truly glad as many years had passed since their last meeting, but he had been looking for her all this time. He was glad that he had finally managed to find her and did not want to lose her so easily. At that very moment, he told his driver to follow the car. He knew that he would never lose her again, and that he would make sure that she would be by his side. After some time, Chu-Chu, bursting into bitter tears, ran to her mother, as she was glad that her mother had finally come for her. Mansi asked her daughter with a smile if she had listened to the teacher today. The young lady was very puzzled, because today she learned to count, and she wanted to avoid growing up, because she did not want to learn what she already knew. Yan looked at his niece with a smile because he saw that she was very angry. He suggested that they go and have a tasty meal, and then all her anger would go away. At that very moment, the young man was taken aback as he saw a happy family. He wondered if she hated him and didn't want to see him. Then, it was a series of coincidences and misunderstandings. He would like to apologize to her personally and confess his feelings, but he saw that she was categorical, and at the same time, she found consolation in both the swelling of another man. At that very moment, he asked his subordinate to leave the place. He no longer wanted to follow her, as he saw that there was no need to interfere with a happy family. A few days later, the young lady said goodbye to the teacher with a smile. She was a little puzzled because she didn't understand why her negligent father didn't find her mother. She knew that he had definitely seen the commercial. After all, in the original, he found her mother from photographs. Chu-Chu knew she had to somehow change the original and adjust everything so that he would find them. At that moment, she was taken aback and looked in bewilderment at the man who called her. But a moment later, the man grabbed the young lady and covered her mouth. He quickly climbed into the car with the girl, and at that very moment, they left the scene of the crime. After some time, they drove into the thick of the forest. They were surprised that the girl did not make a single sound, but they knew that they would soon receive money for the kidnapping. At the same time, the young lady sat quietly and listened to their conversation. She was surprised that she had been kidnapped. After some time, they finally arrived at their destination. At the same time, the girls looked at the girl with bewilderment because they did not understand why they kidnapped her, but the men assured her that the girl was the best option. The man said with a grin that the girl shouldn't be underestimated at all, since she was surrounded by rich people. Shutu, despite their tearful conversations, asked Bai Yi in her eyes, "Are they really going to kill her?" She looked closely at the girl as she understood that they had to get rid of her, the way they had kidnapped her and shown her faces. She sighed heavily and told the girl that if she behaved well, no one would touch her. The young lady sat quietly and agreed with her. Chuju said with a fierce grin that in that case she would be very obedient. At the same time, Mansi was sorting out documents at the company, but moments later, young people entered the hall. The young man looked intently at the young lady. Mansi was taken aback as she realized who was in front of her. At the same Mikanite, they met and greeted each other. Mansi looked closely at the young man, as she did not expect at all that they would meet again after so many years. She knew she had to control herself since he'd dumped her back then, but now she didn't want him to treat her like a doormat. She knew that he must not know about their daughter, because she was afraid that he would take her away. At that moment, she smiled and introduced herself. The young man was taken aback as he saw that she had changed very much. Mansi apologized with a smile and said that she needed to answer a call. But a moment after the conversation, she was taken aback and turned pale as she was informed that her daughter had been kidnapped. Mansi was shocked and did not understand why someone would kidnap her daughter. She wanted to know who the kidnapper really was. Mansi screamed with rage, but it was all in vain. At that moment, she gave in to her emotions and, unable to bear it, collapsed. But the young man managed to quickly catch her. Trembling with fear, she said that her daughter had been kidnapped. Mansi was furious and did not understand why anyone would kidnap a 5-year-old child. At that moment, Songchen was taken aback when he heard how old the girl was. He shouted to the girl that she had better first tell the child's father about the kidnapping. She pulled away from him and said that she would call her brother now. Mansi, with tears in her eyes, called her brother and shouted that her daughter had been kidnapped, and also reported that the kidnappers were demanding a ransom. She screamed that most likely her parents did it because they hated her daughter. But at that very moment, the young man snatched the phone from her and started talking to his brother. He reported what actually happened. Yan asked the young man to take his sister to his home and said that he would arrive soon. Songchen asked Yan if he was Manxi's brother. Yan said with bewilderment that it was so. Songchen was immediately overjoyed at the news. At the same time, the young people looked at their elder's words with puzzlement and asked what had happened. Yan told them that his niece had been kidnapped and ransom money was being demanded. The young people were stunned because they did not know who dared to touch the girl. Changshi realized at that moment what had actually happened. He quickly threw away the documents and ran after the young people as he intended to help them. After some time, everyone was assembled, but they were expecting another call from the kidnappers. Qi told everyone present that he had brought his younger brother, who was very good with computers. But he did not introduce him very nicely, and at the same moment, the young man said that he was not a parasite at all, but helps in everything. He shouted that he was helping in the garden, helping his relatives, and generally feeding the chickens, and they laughed at this. At that moment, everyone froze and held their breath as they saw that the kidnappers were ringing the bell. The kidnappers told her where to bring the money, and they also said that if they found out that she had gone to the police, everything would end badly for them. At that very moment, the young lady cried out that she would like to hear her daughter's voice, but to her regret, she was unable to hear anything. Yan tried to calm his sister down and told her that she had done the right thing and assured her that her daughter would be fine. Songchen was furious because he knew it was all his fault. He was supposed to protect them these years. He knew he had to figure it out and protect his daughter. At that moment, the young man reported where the kidnappers were now. Songchen shouted that he would immediately send his people to search. Qingqi also said that he would send his people to this place. Yan was immediately taken aback as he realized that as her uncle, he was the most useless one in this situation. At the same time, the young lady did not waste a single minute. She approached the kidnapper and with pitiful eyes said that the mosquitoes had bitten her very badly. The man was taken aback because he did not understand why she left. He shouted for her to come back and sit still. He also shouted that she shouldn't be so capricious. She said that she wasn't picky about food and that she used to live in an old, dilapidated house. He looked at her in surprise and said that she seemed to be from a rich family. Chuchu said with tears in her eyes that she and her mother had no money. She said that her father abandoned them and her mother raised her alone. Then her grandmother wanted to marry her mother off to a rich old man, so they were taken from the village. With tears in her eyes, she looked at the kidnapper and asked if they were really going to kill her. The man hesitated, not knowing what to answer. Chuchu said that she understood everything, but at the same time asked him to give her body to her mother because she would cry a lot. She also said that when he received the ransom, he should buy his mother new clothes. The man was taken aback. He didn't want to kill the girl at all, but he really needed the money. At that moment, he told the girl that she should go into the house because there were a lot of mosquitoes outside. Chu left. She said with a smile that he should go to bed early as it would be better for his health. She knew that he was a brute and looked dangerous, but he carried an amulet from his mother. She knew that he would not kill her now because he was very sensitive. Chushu understood perfectly well that she didn't need to relax. They needed to get all the kidnappers under their control. She looked at the man closely as she wanted to figure out how to neutralize him. At that moment, the man was taken aback and angrily asked where she was going in the middle of the night. He approached her and grabbed her by the hair, asking angrily if she really thought she could escape. At that very moment, he pushed her away and shouted that she should sit quietly and not stick her head out, otherwise he would kill her. Chuchu was taken aback and said that she had not run away anywhere. She had just seen a girl with pigtails, and her face was covered in blood. She called her, and she followed her. The man was taken aback and angrily asked what she was talking about. Chuchu said that she was not lying at all, because there really was a beautiful girl there, and she said that she was lost and wanted to go home. The man shouted at her to shut her mouth immediately. He knew she was lying about the girl with pigtails, but he knew that last year he had run away to my small town, and at night he had met a beautiful schoolgirl with pigtails who was asking for directions. She was very beautiful, and he could not resist and dragged her into the bushes. Then she screamed that even after death, she would haunt him. Since then, he had been tormented by nightmares. Chuchu looked at him with a smirk and said that the girl also said that she had not forgiven him. At that very moment, she reported that the girl was now behind him. The man was taken aback, but turned around in a hurry with horror on his face. At that very moment, he saw the ghost and screamed. A few seconds later, he tripped and fell to the ground, hitting his head hard. Chuchu looked at him with a fierce grin as he fainted from fear over a few straws. At that very moment, a man burst into their room and hurriedly asked what had happened to his brother. Chuchu, without wasting a minute, she asked if the scary aunt would really kill her. The man looked at her in surprise, as he did not understand what she was talking about. Chuchu said that sister gave him some water to drink, and after that, he fell down. But she also asked him not to say that she was the one who told him. She looked at him with a fierce grin, as if she wanted him to think for himself what had really happened. The man was taken aback, but at that very moment, Bai Yi came in and asked them to be quieter because she wanted to sleep. Yawning, she handed the man a bottle of water and said that he could drink it since he had to be on duty all night. But to her regret at that very moment, she received a bottle on the head. The man screamed angrily, asking if she really thought he was an idiot, because he realized that she wanted to poison him too, in order to take the entire ransom for herself. She was shocked and screamed that he was not a man for hitting a woman, but he screamed and said that she was trying to poison him. At the same time, a rescue operation was underway to save Chuchu, and a man informed the captain that a conflict was brewing among the kidnappers. But a moment later, he was taken aback as he noticed the young lady. Chuchu took advantage of the confusion and quickly began to untie her hands. She knew that the kidnappers were easy to pit against each other, but the very moment she took a step out of the house, someone grabbed her, and she was taken aback. The man asked the girl not to be afraid of him, as he had come to save her. He immediately informed the captain that he had found the child. A moment later, soldiers burst into the house, but they noticed a fight. They quickly grabbed the young men. After some time, the young lady sat quietly in the care of others. Song Chung-yu was informed that the young lady had been found. Song-chun rushed to the girl because he wanted to know if she was injured anywhere. She looked at the man with a fierce grin and wondered if he was really worried. She immediately realized that the grieving father had already realized that she was his daughter. Chuchu deliberately called him uncle, and with a smile asked if he really brought people to save her. She immediately thanked him for such a thing. He was shocked because his own child called him uncle. He was offended, but the young man was now ready to accept this because he knew that when the right moment came, he would tell her that he was a real father. At that very moment, he asked where her dad was. She smiled and said that, of course, she knew where her father was. He was surprised by this. But at that very moment, I hadn't seen my father for a long time. Song-chun was puzzled and wondered how her mother had delivered the news about her father. He guessed that she had most likely said that he had died. Chuchu smiled and said that her father was a diver, and many years ago he dived underwater and still hasn't returned. That is, he simply died. She looked at him intently as she understood that he had started to mend the relationship too late. She had given him a chance to be her father before, but he had missed it, and now she didn't want to acknowledge him so easily. Sometime later, the young lady finally met her mother. She joyfully threw herself into her mother's arms. Song-chun said that the girl had just returned, and she must be very hungry. Chuchu agreed to have something to eat. Yan looked at the man with fury as he saw that he already considered himself the master of the house. She was informed that they had a cake, and Chuchu happily ran to the kitchen. At the same time, the young master was dealing with the kidnappers. He was informed that one of the kidnappers had gone mad, and the others had almost killed each other, and it seemed that the kidnappers had a disagreement over the division of profits. Chung-chi looked at the young lady with a smile, as he knew that this was her style. He knew that she had abilities and an incredibly high intelligence. He understood that even if she became a small child, she would still be able to survive. At that very moment, he happily took a picture of her quietly so that no one would see. But the young lady noticed such manipulations. She was puzzled and wanted him to calm down a little. She understood that her real father was nearby, and he was openly photographing her mother. Mansi smiled and told her daughter that she should go to bed early, that tomorrow she would have a day off, and that her mother would be with her. At that very moment, the man said that he would come to them tomorrow because he had nothing to do. Mansi was taken aback because she did not expect this. She wondered if he really knew who she really was. Chuchu said with a smile that she didn't want her uncle to come because he was squeamish and didn't like it when she touched him. She told her mother that when she met with their uncle, she must wash her hands, otherwise he would consider her dirty. The man was taken aback, as he did not expect such a thing. At that very moment, he said that he could fix this problem with the mania for cleanliness. Yan looked at the young man intently and asked him to leave. He was angry because the young man flirted with his sister and also neglected his niece. Songchen sighed heavily and said with a smile that it was already late and it was time for him to go home. After some time, the young people went outside. Mansi asked him if he knew about his daughter and whether he intended to take her with him. She shouted that she knew that the family had not had children for many years, and the old man dreamed of holding his grandson in his arms. But still, she did not want to give up her daughter. But at that very moment, he said that he did not intend to do this. She looked at him with tears in her eyes and said that, of course, this is true, because he doesn't love his daughter. The young man was taken aback and said that this is not true. He ran up to her and began to assure her that everything was quite the opposite. He was shocked and did not understand why she was making things difficult, because if he intended to take his daughter, she would say that he stole her if he did not take her. She would say that he did not love her. Mansi looked at him intently and said that whether he liked it or not, she did not intend to let him take her child. Songchen was taken aback and looked at his beloved with embarrassment, as she was beautiful. At that very moment, he grabbed the young lady's hand and said that the girl was also his daughter. He said that she could not leave her without a father, and him without a wife. He had been looking for her for many years, and had no intention of letting her go. Mansi said that he had another wife, and he loved her only because of her appearance, which reminded him of his wife, and therefore she was already tired of being a replacement. At that very moment, the young man shouted that he did not love his bride at all. He did not have time to finish speaking because they were disturbed. Yan told his sister to return home immediately because her daughter wanted to eat the cake, and he did not know how to cut it because he only knew how to cut meat. Songchen was taken aback because he saw a young man with a knife in his hands, and he was too threatening. A moment later, he asked the young man not to come to them anymore. Songchen sighed heavily because he knew that he deserved this kind of treatment. After all, he was an idiot before. Chuchu finished watching her parents. She knew that in the original story, her mother suffered until the end. She understood that if she had not accidentally fallen into an affair, her mother would have suffered all her life. A few days later, the young people learned who exactly was behind the kidnapping. But the kidnappers claimed that they had received a virtual order via the internet, and that someone mysterious had paid them a large sum to kidnap my girl. He said that the police had found several clues, but they could not fully determine who the customer really was. Mansi was furious because she knew there was one person who intended to harm her. She knew who was really involved. Yan looked at his sister and told her more details of the investigation. At the same time, the young lady was standing quietly outside the door and listening to their conversation. She realized that the Zhao family and someone from the United States were behind her kidnapping. She wondered at that moment if all this had happened because of her father's love affairs. Cheng Qingyun the villainous. When she went to America for treatment, the young man found her mother, who looked like her ex. Later, the villain returned and got back together with her fiancé, at which time he kicked out his pregnant mistress. Later, the villain found out that her rival got married, but she did not stop pestering her. Then she announced that she needed a kidney transplant, and the ideal donor was the main character, Mr. Li, who wanted to please the girl and his family. He forced his wife to give one kidney. Chuchu knew she couldn't do it, so she wanted to get to the bottom of it. At that moment, she was taken aback because someone sent a message that they would soon see each other at the International Hacker Championship. She wondered if there was anyone in the world she had given away who was her equal in skill. She froze for a moment as she already had an idea of who could compete with her. She wondered if this was the same stalker she had slept with in her past life. The young lady was taken aback and wondered if he had also fallen into this novel. Choo-Choo was furious because she was just a little girl, and he had already hired the Snatchers to eliminate her. At that moment, she confirmed her application for participation. She understood that she would have to meet him soon. At the same time, the young man grinned as he understood that this was the same vindictive little one that he remembered. After some time, the young lady happily enjoyed the dessert. Mansi realized that yesterday's events had not left her daughter traumatized, but she knew that soon her daughter would find out who her biological father really was. At that very moment, she looked at her daughter and asked if she wanted to meet her father, and if she wanted to, she would take her to him. Choo-Choo knew that in the original, her mother lived horribly. She saw that her mother was kind and deserved better. She understood that if this could protect her mother, then she would recognize the man as her father. Choo-Choo told her mother that if she still loved her father, she was ready to meet him because she wanted the best mother in the world to be happy. She wanted her father to protect them, and when she grew up, she would protect them all. At that very moment, Mansi looked at her daughter with a smile and thanked her for such words. At the same time, the young man was heading to his daughter with a gift he read on the internet, that he now loves girls the most. He knew that his daughter would be delighted with this gift and would say with admiration that she loved him. Song-chen was already looking forward to their meeting with a satisfied smile. But at that very moment, all his thoughts were dispelled as the young master called him. He looked at the young master in surprise, as he did not understand who he had come to. Chi said that he had come to see the miss as he wanted to clarify something. Song-chen was puzzled that a young man would come to his wife in broad daylight. Chi knew that it was just an excuse as he wanted to see Choo-Choo. At that very moment, the maid met the young master and asked him to come into the house quickly. Song-chen looked at the maid with bewilderment and asked if he had really been invited into her house. At that very moment, he turned around because he heard someone calling him. Lu Shanhei looked at the young man with a grin and said that he was just like a ghost as he followed him everywhere. At that very moment, their eyes met. Lu Shanhei looked at the young man and said that when he first saw her, she knocked him out cold. He said that it was then that he invited her to play the lead role in the film. He understood that if she continued to act in his films, she would become a top actress. But soon a young man appeared and snatched her from under his nose, and then she left show business. Lu Shanhei was angry because he knew that such an outstanding actress had buried her talent for the sake of a young man. Lu Shanhei furiously told the young man that she had run away from him. He didn't understand how he dared to come to her. At the same time, the young lady was happily enjoying a wonderful dessert. She thanked the young gentleman with a smile and also said that she should not eat too many sweets, otherwise her teeth might get damaged. She felt a little uneasy about the amount of sweets and hoped that next time he would bring something different for a change. At that very moment, the maid informed the young lady that Mr. Lu had come to see her. A moment later, Manxi ran up to the teacher and greeted him. She hugged him with a joyful smile, as they had not seen each other for a long time. He hugged her tenderly, as he was glad that they met again after a long separation. Mansi, with a gentle smile, asked the teacher to go into the room, as they had many topics to talk about. Song-chen in turn froze at the threshold, as he was waiting for someone to invite him into the house. At the same time, Chi smiled and told the young lady that if she wanted to play on the computer, he could give her his. She told him what game she wanted to play, and then he was surprised because he noticed that she liked difficult games. Choo-Choo looked at him with bewilderment, as he seemed somehow strange to her, since he intended to win her favor. She understood that he had taken a difficult path, but she was also sad about Togo, because in the original, he died quite tragically. She understood that, given that he looked after her and saved her and her mother several times, she simply could not abandon him in trouble. At that very moment, they were taken aback, as Mansi was seeing off her teacher. She smiled and said that this was her brother's apartment, and that she and her son and daughter were living in the apartment temporarily. At that very moment, she introduced her daughter with a smile. Choo-Choo greeted her mother's teacher with a smile. She saw a minor male character who was loved by the readers. The man looked closely at the girl as he heard how old she was, and assumed that she was Song-chen's child. Mansi looked at her daughter with a smile, and at that very moment began to look after her. Lu Shanhei in turn was furious because he realized that the girl raised the child herself. He understood that it was very difficult for her. At that very moment, he turned around and looked at the director with fury. But a moment later, he told her that next time he would bring her a gift in the form of a doll. She said that she didn't need a doll because she wanted a new play figure. Looking at her father's grief, she shouted that she hated dolls. The young man immediately threw away the doll without hesitation. He was taken aback and showed with his gaze that there was no doll at all. After a long conversation, the man finally told his companion that he really hoped she would think about his request. He said with a smile that now that she had solved her problems, she could think about herself. She smiled and said that she would think about everything. For some time, the young lady stared intently after the teacher, but after a few minutes, she turned around and froze in surprise. Mansi didn't expect that the young man would wait any longer. At that very moment, he approached her and said in all seriousness that he had never considered her a replacement. But she didn't let him finish and said that she had to tell him something herself. At that very moment, she reported that two forces were involved in the kidnapping of their daughter, namely her family, and the other was hiding in the United States. She thought that the foreign force was somehow connected with his fans. Mansi asked the young man to stay away from them if he wanted to protect his daughter. As she left, she shouted that he should not come to them again if he did not want to put his daughter in danger again. At that very moment, the young man was taken aback, as he did not understand which fans were being talked about and what it meant to put them in danger again. A month later, the young lady watched her father play with the dog in the garden for an hour and then leave. She said that her uncle did not let her father into the house, so he secretly looked in on them, and when leaving, he turned around at every step. Mansi sighed heavily and told her daughter not to pay attention to him because he would soon leave on his own. Chutu was glad that her mother had been feeling well lately, and her mother was no longer as weak as in the original, and she had also become smarter. At that very moment, they heard a ringing at the door. Chuchu happily shouted that most likely her uncle had returned, and so she would go and open the door for him. The young lady ran to the door in joy and opened it. But it wasn't her uncle there at all. Chuchu was taken aback when she saw her aunt. Manchi's niece said with a smile that she probably didn't miss her. At that very moment, the young lady wondered why she had come, but what killed her even more was that her aunt had poured a whole liter of perfume on herself, and she smelled terribly. Manchi entered the house and asked her sister with a smile if her brother was home. Manchi was informed that she had come to visit her brother. She said with a grin that her older brother was strange because he abandoned a luxurious house and lived in some wreck and let anyone into his house. She knew that her brother had recently become very close with a famous director. She understood that if her brother helped her, she would be able to play the leading role in the film. Manchi knew that if she did, her popularity would skyrocket, and she would be one step closer to her fiancé Song Chen. She understood that she had to seize this chance, become an actress, and win the young man's favor. And after he proposes to her, she will happily agree, and then she will become the mistress of the Song family. Mansi told her sister that their brother was busy with the show and would return later. At that very moment, the young lady said with a grin that her aunt was mistaken, because her uncle would definitely not bring home such harmful trash as her. Manchi sighed heavily and calmed down, as she knew that she couldn't get angry because she wanted to keep her makeup in perfect condition. Manchi asked her sister in surprise if she had really read the script. She also asked if her sister would really like to get a role in a film by a famous director through her brother. Manchi told her sister with a smirk that she was not at all suitable for acting, and the director would not even look at her. Manchi said with a satisfied grin that she would be perfect for the role of the main character, since last year he even left her a business card. For some time, all she could do was tell her sister that she was not fit for the role, and that she was only fit to raise a child. But at that very moment, the mother and daughter looked intently at the girl and asked her to be silent for a bit. Manchi was shocked, as she did not expect such pressure from them. But at that very moment, there was a doorbell. Someone rang it, and the lady quickly ran to the door. Lu Shanhei greeted his student with a smile and asked if she liked the script. At that very moment, the young lady greeted the director, and he said with a smile that he had brought her the figurine that you had promised her last time. She thanked him with a smile. Manchi was shocked, because she knew that the director was known for having a bad temper and kept everyone at a distance. She didn't understand how they managed to find an approach to him. At that very moment, Manchi greeted the director with a joyful smile and quickly introduced herself. He greeted her coldly and stepped aside, leaving the young lady frozen in shock. She was shocked and couldn't believe how he dared to ignore her while he spoke kindly and politely to her sister. She also heard that her sister had made changes to the script. Manchi knew perfectly well that her sister had dropped out of school at an early age and then worked in some town, and now she dared to edit the script of the great master. At that very moment, the man said that some moments in the script should not be changed. Manchi asked her sister how she could easily change someone else's script. While they were talking about the script, the young lady kept hovering around them. At that moment, he said with a smile that he was now thinking about adding the new scene that she suggested. Manchi was shocked by his words. At that moment, she smiled and told the director that she had also studied screenwriting and could help in editing the script. But at that very moment, he rudely asked her if she could please keep quiet. Manchi was taken aback and told the director that she had not meant to offend him at all. She had simply thought that she could help her sister be his assistant. But at that very moment, he could not stand it and shouted for her to shut up as the noise was giving him a headache. Manchi froze for a moment in shock as she did not expect anything like this. At that very moment, the man asked Manchi to open an office for him so that he could quietly work on the script. Manchi was shocked, and she did not understand why the director was so soft only towards her sister. She didn't know how many men her sister had been with, but she assumed she knew how to seduce. At that very moment, she looked at her sister and said that she had apparently underestimated her. After all, she had many tricks and tricks. Manchi told her sister that the director was her mentor. Manchi mockingly asked her sister how the great director could be her mentor. She looked at her sister with a grin and said that the experienced woman had already given birth to a child, and she probably managed to please him in bed. Manchi could not stand such rudeness and shouted at her sister to leave immediately. Manchi mockingly asked her sister if she really felt ashamed since she had simply told the truth. Chu had no intention of listening to such insults. At that moment, she raised her sharp teeth towards her aunt. A moment later, she bit her hand. Manchi was shocked. She screamed at her niece to let her go immediately. Chu said at the same moment that she had baby teeth, and it didn't hurt at all. But if a dog bit her, it would hurt. Manchi said that she would complain to her older brother, and he would quickly deal with them. At that very moment, Manchi called her daughter. She hugged her tightly and said that it was not right to talk to adults like that. She also said that children should not interfere in adult conflicts. Manchi was furious and knew that she would no longer allow her family to be humiliated. At that very moment, the young lady looked at her mother with joy as she realized that she had already woken up. She was happy and understood that she, a man, could not hope. And now her mother understood that she had to be strong in order to protect her family. A few days later, Song Chen took the young lady to the filming location. She understood that he wanted to anger the screenwriter and show him what a good father he was. While her mother was cramming the script, he had time to take her for a walk. Song Chen asked his daughter who she liked, Uncle Lu or him. She understood that her grief-stricken father had failed to raise her mother's level of affection and had already begun to compete with other men. She smiled and said that she loved Uncle Lu, Uncle Song, Brother Chi, and Brother Xiaozhou. He understood that even though she said she loved him, he would not tell her anytime soon that he was her father. At the same time, there was chaos on the set as the director angrily shouted and chased the actors away. The man told his mentor that he had been working all day and needed to rest a little. At that very moment, a young lady entered and looked around with joy, as if she had noticed many beautiful people. Lu Shanhe looked at the girl with joy, as he was glad that she had come. She immediately smiled and greeted him, and he asked why she had come to him. At that very moment, his assistant said that the girl found out that he was busy and had not yet had lunch, so she came to have lunch with him. She smiled and said that it was a very good idea as she was very hungry. Lu Shanhe glanced sideways at the young man, not expecting him to come. Song Chen smiled and said that he came with Chu while he lifted the young lady up. Song Chen smiled and said that today was his day off, and the young lady had just finished her homework, so he took her out for a walk. Song Chen in turn wanted to show that he and his daughter had a good relationship, but the man looked askance at the father's grief and realized that he was just a fool. After some time, they were served a wonderful dinner. Chu presented her uncle with delicious food with a smile and said that her mother said that even if someone worked, one should not forget about food because the body will be ill. Song Chen sighed heavily and said that he had to work hard and had gastritis. At that very moment, she smiled and presented him with food as well. He was glad that his daughter had given him meat. She was shocked because her father was jealous. She understood that he was childish and wondered if he would really go to kindergarten with her. At that very moment, he smiled and said that he needed to answer a call and he would go away. Moments later, the director was also called to approve the script. She looked around as if she wanted something to drink after a hearty lunch. At that very moment, the young lady saw a small refrigerator and realized that there was something in there. Before she could even open the refrigerator, she heard some kind of muffled mechanism. And a moment later, she was taken aback as the sound grew louder. Chu-Chu raised her gaze upward and saw that the equipment was rushing towards her from above. She was puzzled and just froze in place. At that very moment, the man heard some noise and looked around. He saw everything that happened and quickly rushed towards the young lady. The man still managed to grab the girl, and they fell with a crash. Lu Shanhe in turn realized what had happened, and at that very moment, he screamed and called out to the young lady. The man looked at the lady intently and asked if she was okay. Chu-Chu looked at the man in surprise and intently, and at the same time thanked him for saving her. The men quickly rushed towards the young girl and also asked Zhang Qi, how does he feel? Songchen immediately said that he would immediately take them to the hospital. After examination, the doctor reported that the young lady had minor abrasions on her hand and ankle, but everything had been treated, and soon she would not have a single wound left. The doctor also said that the young lady should remain under observation, and if everything is okay, they will release her. At that very moment, the doctor reported that Zhang Qi, the situation is more serious, as he had a concussion and glass shards were left in his shin. Songchen told the director that he had financed the studio last year, and that this amount of money should have been enough for new equipment. Lu Shanhe looked at the man menacingly and asked, "Are you really saying that his equipment is outdated?" He asked his assistant to tell him about the checks on their equipment. Lu Shanhe said it was just an accident, but the man was furious at such words. Chu-Chu said with a smile that if it was an accident, then it would be good, because if Uncle Lu had gone to get water, he would have suffered. She realized that she had opened the refrigerator and heard a muffled sound, and even then, she realized that someone had set a trap on purpose. At that moment, the men looked at the young lady in surprise, as they realized that she was right. Lu Shanhe thought for a moment and told everyone that this was his personal refrigerator, and that it contained his water food and masks. He was taken aback, because he realized that everything could fall on him. At that very moment, he shouted to his assistant to immediately call the police and check the cameras. Songchen was shocked because he knew that his daughter should not hear such a thing. The lady was taken aback because she realized that her father was worried about her, but this was unnecessary. At that very moment, he looked at the director and asked him to speak more quietly in front of the child and not to talk about death at all. He also asked the director if he had any suspects who might have seen him. He sighed heavily as he knew there were too many of them and he couldn't remember them all. Songchen sighed heavily and said that the man was just a pathetic loser. Chu-Chu understood that they were simply childish because they measured themselves by the number of enemies. She understood that compared to her, they were all just trash. At that very moment, she was taken aback as her mother ran into the room. She looked over her daughter hastily as she was very worried, but the young lady assured her mother that she was all right. The young people looked around at each other as they knew that Mansi should not know anything about the assassination attempt. Songchen immediately assured the girl that their daughter was fine. It was just an accident. She immediately pounced on him because she was too busy and allowed him to take her daughter with him, and he did not protect her. He sighed heavily and said that it was his fault because he had never looked after children before, and he simply had no experience, but he promised that he would be careful. She was shocked because he admitted his mistake. She knew that he never bowed his head to anyone. At that very moment, he smiled and said that she was in a hurry and had not had time to have lunch, so he had already ordered food. But while they were waiting, he could peel an apple. She looked at him in surprise as she didn't remember him knowing how to peel apples. Songchen smiled and said that he had learned it on purpose. To get his daughter and wife back, he spent nights practicing peeling apples and finally mastered the art. She knew that he was a terrible neat freak, avoided the kitchen, was picky about food, didn't sleep at night, and worked non-stop. He never did anything like that. At the same moment, she said that his fiancée was often ill, and it seemed that he had learned to peel apples for her sake. Songchen was shocked by such a statement. He began to justify himself and said that he had only learned it half a month ago, and he had learned a lot, and it had nothing to do with his fiancée. At the same time, their drama was being watched from the sidelines. Some time later, the doctor informed the young people that they had already removed the glass from the gentleman's neck and that his wound was not deep, and that he would recover in a few weeks. At that very moment, guests entered their room and greeted them with joy. Mansi looked at the man with a smile and introduced herself, thanking him for saving her daughter. He looked at her in surprise and asked if she was Gu Josya, who left the film industry several years ago. She smiled and asked if he knew her. She also said that she used to have this name, but her real name is Mansi. Jiang Xie said with a smile that of course he knew her, because she had once become famous thanks to a film. He said that he had also followed her because she was his idol. Chu Chu looked at the man because she knew he was a cameo character in the original, and thanks to his outstanding performance in the film, he became famous. However, she knew that he would later find himself in the center of a cheating scandal, and his ideal wife would file for divorce more profitably, and he would be left penniless, after which his career would collapse. Trying to regain his former glory, he eventually died of overwork. She knew that he was a very decent person, and so she wondered if he would really change in the future, but she still assumed that someone had set him up. Chu Chu knew she had to thank him for saving her life. She knew that when the time came, she would find out more about everything. At that very moment, the director told them that they would be starring in the same film. Zhang Qi was shocked that he would be starring in the same film with his idol. Chu Chu smiled and asked her mother if she had been an actress, before Mansi smiled and said that it was true. Chu Chu smiled and told her mother that she was the most beautiful in the world and would soon become a big star. But she also asked why her mother no longer acted in films. Mansi hesitated, not knowing what to answer her daughter. Lu Shanhe sighed heavily and told the young girl that her mother was a talented actress. She was just unlucky enough to encounter some scoundrels. Chu Chu immediately asked who the scoundrel was. Lu Shanhe said angrily that it was one criminal. Mansi looked at everyone present with a smile and said that she needed to take her daughter home since she had not done her homework for kindergarten. At that very moment, as they were leaving, they ran into the young master. He looked at them in surprise and asked what they were doing in his hospital. Lu Shanhe said that there was an accident on the set, and he also asked the young gentleman to take care of his friend, who would be in the hospital for a few days. Changxi said that he would of course take care of the man, but at the same time, he turned his gaze to the young lady. He looked closely at the young lady and noticed that, fortunately, she was not badly hurt. As he left, he sighed heavily and said that he had things to do. Chu Chu stared at the young master. His behavior seemed very strange to her because he didn't even look at her mother, although he was courting her. Some time later, the young gentleman was informed that they had checked the cameras, and according to the recordings, the equipment failure was staged, and most likely the target was the director himself, and the young people were simply hit by accident. He was very angry because he knew that the young lady knew how to stand up for herself, but in the end, she was just a child, and this was not the demonization from his past that could kill with one look. He was very angry because he understood that there was too much unknown in this plot. He wanted to get out of this work as soon as possible. Some time later, the young man came to visit his daughter and happily presented her with various delicious treats. But a moment later, he was taken aback as he saw that the director was calling him. Lu Shanhe reportedly checked his camera footage and found the person messing with their refrigerator. And it was Zhang Rui, a little-known actor, who failed a recent casting. Songchen reported that he had lured the young man for a trial run. At that very moment, he looked at the young lady and said that he had urgent business to attend to, and that he was leaving. She smiled and said that she understood everything. As he left, he smiled and said that they should wait for him, as he would return and cook them something delicious. Madame looked closely at the lady, and with a smile said that it seemed to her that the gentleman would quickly give in. But he was very persistent, because he even asked her for recipes, because he wanted to cook a delicious dinner. Mansi was leaving. She told Madame that she had to check whether her daughter had finished her homework. After some time, she entered the room and called her daughter. Chu Shuvi sat quietly in the car in line. She knew that her father had definitely gone to catch the one who was rummaging through the refrigerator. She wanted to see who had built something like this. Getting out of the car, the young man was taken aback because he heard someone's voice. Opening the door, he froze in shock as he saw his daughter. He didn't understand how she ended up in his trunk. He asked in surprise if she had really run away from her mother secretly. He said that it was very dangerous, but she laughed in response. Chu Chu said with a smile that she would like to play with him. Songchen looked at his daughter with a satisfied smile, as such words were a delight to his ears, and he was very happy. He didn't know how his treasure could be so cute. He said with a smile that next time she shouldn't run away. After some time, they came out into the office and greeted the director. Lu Shunhei looked at the man in surprise and asked why he brought the nth lady to such a place. He sighed heavily and said that she had secretly snuck into the car. Lu Shunhei looked at the girl closely and said that he heard that she liked to play the computer, so she could go and play. Lu Shunhei looked at the young lady with a smile and asked her not to run away. Lu Shunhei quickly turned his gaze to Song Chen and said that the man who was fiddling with the equipment yesterday was caught at the casting and was tried after the recording was played for him. He immediately confessed. Song Chen sighed heavily and said that his confession was a lie and that there was definitely someone behind it. They understood that he had a patron because an actor without a connection could not openly rummage through his dressing room. Lu Shunhei sighed heavily and said that he thought it was the work of the Wang Company Entertainment. He also told the man that the share of the show business was under his control and the rest was with the Wang family. Lu Shunhei told the man that he was lying about his new film and it had a chance to become a box office hit, and his competitors were afraid of losing their market share, so this move was quite possible on their part. Song Chen Bio sighed and said that if they were really behind this incident, then it seemed like they were in very bad shape. He was furious because he understood that the company would soon go bankrupt. At the same time, the young lady quietly eavesdropped on them. She knew that her father was still very formidable. Fuquei immediately brought the man who was involved in this incident to his mentor, and he also said that he was currently investigating this incident, so he could rest assured. At that very moment, the man began to angrily shout at the director and insult him with every possible word. He was very angry that the director chose someone else for the lead role. Lu Shunhei grabbed the man in a rage and asked if the young man was not fit to be an actor, and therefore decided to kill him. He shouted at the man to go to his prison. Song Chen did not sit aside and called the man. He was taken aback, as he did not expect to see the master. Song Chen stared at the man and said menacingly that if he worked for the Wang Company, he would face severe retribution. The man was taken aback and said in a puzzled tone that he did not understand at all what was being discussed. He had not expected to see the gentleman in such a place, and he could see that the gentleman was very angry. Song Chen sighed heavily and told the man that he would soon understand everything himself. He was furious because they almost killed his daughter and almost destroyed his love and family. At the same time, the young lady was sitting quietly in the next room and eavesdropping on their conversation. She understood that the man would end up in prison for a long time. Chu understood perfectly well that the man was just someone's pawn, and she needed to find out who was behind this incident. At that very moment, she broke the system and began digging for information that interested her. She was taken aback when she saw that there was something wrong with Zhang Ri's contracts, and that he suddenly had an extra million in his account. She saw that the sender of the payment was Van Entertainment. Chu understood that this company had completely lost all fear because they were not at all afraid that her father would ruin them, and they did their business openly. She was glad that her savior was not harmed. She also understood that the director was not harmed, and they would definitely not calm down. She wanted to somehow unobtrusively reveal this information to her father. Chu understood that the best option would be to give them the weapon and let them figure out what to do with it. At that very moment, she turned around and joyfully asked her uncle if they had already returned. But at that very moment, she saw an unfamiliar man who asked with surprise who she was. Chu froze for a moment as she saw a truly beautiful man. But at that same moment, she realized that in front of her was the main character who in the novel was secretly in love with her mother. The man looked at the girl with bewilderment because he knew that the director did not like children, and even more so, he did not like it when someone touched his computer without permission. She was a little puzzled as she didn't understand why he was looking at her so intently, since even his gaze showed hostility. Some time later, they sat quietly in the office, and the atmosphere was somehow tense. Chu looked at the man intently and said with a smile that she would often see him on TV, and that she and her mother loved him very much. She introduced herself at that very moment. At the same moment, he coldly asked if she knew where the director was now. She didn't have time to answer anything when suddenly the director came into my room. The young people greeted each other, and the director asked the actor when he had managed to arrive without even warning. Jiang Cheng said with a smile that he had just arrived yesterday, and that he had also brought him honey. The man smiled and thanked him. Lu Shanhe looked at the girl with a smile and said that her mother had been working a lot lately, so she could take some honey in a jar when she left. The young lady thanked uncle with a joyful smile. Zhang Cheng immediately looked away from the young lady, who looked at him with bewilderment. She also knew that the great actor was keeping a close eye on the director, so the young lady intended to find out everything. Song Chen immediately told the director not to bother himself with worries, since Manxi had everything, and he could keep the honey for himself. A moment after the young man's words, they got into a heated argument. But their quarrel did not last long, as Song Chen saw that his beloved was calling him on a video call, and he bragged about it. He hastily accepted her call, and at that very moment, he heard the worried voice of a mother who was looking for her daughter. Song Chen said with a smile that she was with him, and he also said that she secretly got into his car and ran away. Chu Chu smiled and said that she really loved playing with her uncle, and it would be nice if they met every week. The young man was very happy with his daughter's words, since she loved him and wanted to play with him. He understood that they were becoming closer, and at the same time, the young people watched their conversation closely. Lu Shanhe understood that even though the girl was Song Chen's biological daughter, he still felt uneasy about them because he had a fiancée with a very bad characters. At the same time, the young man looked closely at the girl because he wanted to know who her mother really was. He was surprised that the director cared about the mother and daughter, and he also argued with the gentleman because of them. After some time, the father and daughter left them, and Zhang Cheng asked the director if he knew the girl's mother. He smiled and said that everyone loved the girl, and also in his film there was a childhood role, the main character, and he wanted to talk to her mother so that she could play it. Lu Shanhe smiled and told his friend that he had already seen her mother, but he had to keep it a secret for now. He smiled and told his friend that when he found out who her mother really was, he would be very surprised. Zhang Cheng looked at his friend closely because he knew that ever since his favorite woman left the cinema, he had stopped smiling with a radiant smile, but thanks to the woman, he looked relaxed, and he even began to wonder who she really was. The young man, in turn, was even a little envious. Chao Weiji looked at her friend closely and said that it would be better for her to rest at home, as she did not look her best. She also asked her friend where her fiancé was now. Cheng Qingyun sighed heavily and said that she wanted to find him, but his staff said that he was away on business, so she decided to visit her friend. Cheng Qingyun was puzzled because ever since his mistress left many years ago, he had become a different person, and she found it difficult to understand him, but she knew that she had to maintain her status as his fiancé. At that very moment, she congratulated her friend because she got a role in the film of the famous director. Chao Yueji sighed heavily and said that she had been given the role of a supporting character, and she raised that she shouldn't brag at all. Cheng Qingyun was surprised by this because she knew that her friend was very talented and could easily play the leading role. She wanted to know who the actress who played the leading role was, but unfortunately, no one knew. At that very moment, the young lady went into their room and informed them that the director had published a poster with the film's main character, and it was some new actress, and there was no information about her on the internet at all. But the young lady looked quite pretty. Chao Yueji was shocked and did not understand why she was chosen for the main role since she left the industry a long time ago. Cheng Qingyun asked in surprise who they were talking about, but at that very moment she was taken aback because she saw a familiar person. She was in shock as she had had great difficulty getting rid of the young lady, and now she is back on screen and in their lives. Chao Weiji was furious and did not understand why the girl returned since she was her competitor, and when she left the industry, she spent a lot of money to delete all the photos and posts about her on the internet, and even filed a complaint against the film she starred in. Chao Weiji asked furiously if the girl had come back again to steal her word and the attention of the great director. Cheng Qingyun was very angry, but she knew that she had managed to drive the girl out once and could do something similar again. Mansi looked at her daughter with joy and announced that she was going to the studio. At that moment, the young lady said goodbye to her mother with a smile. Manxi asked her daughter to behave well and not run around the house, and she also said that she would check her fakes when she returned home. The young lady, with a joyful smile, told her mother that she would not be naughty at all, but after a while she froze as she realized that she would still have to make crafts. She was shocked because she did not understand why she, the fatal devil, had to cut out various fakes. She wanted someone to come to her aid. At that very moment, a young gentleman came to their house and called the lady. Chu was very happy because she realized that her savior had come to her home. At that very moment, she looked at her little brother with a smile and asked him to help her with her homework. He looked at the young lady in surprise, but immediately agreed. But in his heart, he rejoiced because he saw a sweet girl in front of him. After some time, he was sitting at the table cutting out crafts for the young lady. Chu looked closely at the young man. She knew that if he were a little older, her father would have another competitor. At the same time, he asked the young lady when her mother would return. Chu stared at him and said that she would be back late as she had to have dinner with Director Luz. She looked at him with a fierce grin as she understood that he came to them for her mother's sake. But she knew that he would have to stand in line as her mother had many admirers. At that very moment, he smiled and said that they could chat a little. He asked if there was a boy in her group that she liked. At that very moment, she shouted that there was no one. Chu said in a hurry that her mother told her that they could only date when she was of age. She was surprised and looked at him as she realized that he still had tricky questions. He thought for a moment after her words. When he was leading the case of the Ace of Hearts, he was ordered to arrest her, and she had just turned 18 years old. He knew that this was a wonderful age, and at such a period, many unexpected turns of fate happen. At that very moment, he smiled and asked what type of guys she liked. The lady was surprised by his questions and thought for a moment. A moment later, she announced that she liked a tall man with black eyebrows, big eyes, thin lips, and a beautiful face, and ideally, he would be in a black tuxedo. She wanted him to be able to fight play games, and most importantly, cook, drive race cars, and even airplanes. At that moment, she was taken aback as she immediately thought of Shinseyo. He looked at her with a smile and said that she seemed to have very good taste. Chi was very pleased since she described him in his past life. He now realized that she still remembered him. Chu smiled and asked what kind of girls he liked. The young man didn't think twice. I liked one girl who knew how to fight. She was impudent and deceived everyone left and right. But at the same time, she secretly fed homeless kittens. She was also bad, cheeky, and shameless, and she was the type to quietly run away after spending the night together. She was cunning and quick, and she eluded him every time. And in doing so, she drove him crazy. It infuriated him that he couldn't catch her, but he also loved her for not being able to. Chu looked at the young man with a smile, because she understood that he had fallen in love with her mother and was confused after the question. But she understood that he should not fall too much in love with hers. After some time, he said goodbye to the young lady as he was already getting ready to go home. His assistant looked at him in surprise, as he had played with the lady for a long time today. Chengchi smiled and told his subordinate to tell the kindergarten teacher to give Chu more crafts for homework. His subordinate was surprised because he realized that his master loved handicrafts. Sometime later, Lu Shenhe introduced the main character of the film to his friend with a smile. Jiang Cheng was momentarily taken aback and stood frozen in shock, but now he realized that she was the girl's mother. At that very moment, her young lady greeted her old acquaintance with a smile. He was glad that she was returning to the film industry after many years, because the young man understood that this was the main event. Lu Shenhe said that filming would begin in a month, so they had time to read the script and rehearse in advance. The young people happily agreed. Mansi, looking at the young people, said that they could go into the office and check the script. At that moment, the director noticed that the young lady was sitting and playing games. He came closer to her and said that she seemed to be very smart and good at games. At that moment, they were both taken aback as they heard a familiar voice. Songchen looked at the director with a satisfied grin and said that the young lady had very good genes. He knew that his daughter was very similar to him and was very good in everything. Lu Shenhe looked at the young man with fury because he did not understand why he was hanging around in such a place again. Songchen also attacked the director because he saw him every day near Manxist. The man looked at him angrily, but said nothing. At that moment, he pulled the young man as he wanted to talk to him outside. At the same time, Songchen shouted to his daughter that he had brought her a lot of sweets. The young lady looked at them in bewilderment as she did not understand what they were even doing. Lu Shenhe dragged the young man outside and angrily asked him if he was pretending to be blind or if he really couldn't see anything. Lu Shenhe. He told the man that if he really cared about his beloved, then he should do something already since the haters were washing all her bones on social media. Songchen sighed heavily and said that he would handle everything. The director looked at him in surprise and asked what he was going to do. The man thought for a moment. But a moment later, he said with a satisfied smile that he had money and it solved everything. The director was puzzled by his words. But at that very moment, Song Chen told his comrade to look at everything himself. Lu Shanhei was shocked because he saw that the man managed to lift the ban on his beautiful film. Song Chen smiled and said that when the haters watch this movie, they will realize how good Manxi is as an actress, and then they will immediately shut their mouths. A few days later, Song Chen brought his daughter alive to the company. All the employees were surprised because they did not know who the young lady really was. They wondered if she was the CEO's illegitimate daughter, since he was holding her in his arms. Song Chen smiled and told his daughter that the company had recently received a batch of smart robots, and that instead of delivering coffee and food around the office, he told his daughter that if she liked one, he would give it to her. Song Chen looked at the rain with a happy smile because he understood what she really liked. He understood that she liked interesting and technological things, not pink dolls. He understood perfectly well that she would have everything she could dream of. When they entered the office, they looked at Cheng in surprise. Qing Yun, who greeted them with a joyful smile, told her fiancé that she had prepared chicken soup especially for him and brought it. Song Chen immediately said that she didn't need to bother herself because he had someone to look after it. She was taken aback and said that she heard that he had been working a lot lately, so she didn't want him to overwork himself and wanted to take care of him. At that very moment, she said with tears in her eyes that the doctors had told her that she did not have long to live, and she did not want to die with this burden on her soul, and she just wanted to take care of him one last time. Chu looked closely at the woman because she knew who should give her the Oscar. She understood that in front of her was a real drama queen who knew how to pull the wool over people's eyes. Song Chen sighed and told the girl that she was being treated by the best doctors in the country and that she would not die. At that moment, Chu said with a smile that the soup smelled very delicious. She also asked who the aunt was, who had come to visit him. The man hesitated, not knowing what to answer. But at the same moment, she said with a smile that she understood everything since her aunt had prepared the soup. It meant she was a cook. Chen Qingyun was taken aback, as she didn't expect anything like this. Chu smiled and said that she would like to try the chicken soup that Auntie Cook brought. He smiled and said that he would immediately find a suitable bowl for her and pour it. At the same moment, he said with a smile that she should sing it more slowly. Chu thanked the cook's aunt with a smile for the delicious chicken soup. She also said that she drank every last drop. Cheng Qingyun, with suppressed anger, told the girl that it was good that she liked him. But in her heart, she was very angry, since the girl drank the soup that she made. Cheng Qingyun immediately asked the young man with a smile whose child it was, since she had never seen the girl before. He froze, not knowing what to answer. But at that very moment, he remembered how his beloved had said that several forces were involved in the kidnapping of their daughter, and one was her family, and the other was hiding in America. He immediately realized that he couldn't say who Chu really was, because he knew there were too many coincidences. He also knew that they weren't a complete family right now, so it was better not to reveal his daughter's identity, because that way he could protect her. At the same moment, he said that the young lady was his partner's child. Chu looked closely at the man and asked with a smile, when they would go, look at the robots. He smiled and said that they would go soon, since everything was ready. Cheng Qingyun stared at the man, knowing his character. He would not mess with their children. She raised the fact that he did not want to reveal the child's identity. She understood that since he was pretending, she would also support his performance. Cheng Qingyun smiled and told the girl that she could call us her little sister. She also said that she was not her uncle's personal chef because she was his fiancée. Chu looked at her in surprise. Cheng Qingyun said with a smile that she was his future wife. She hugged the young man tightly and at the same moment said with a joyful smile that they would soon get married. Song Chen pulled away from her and shouted at his daughter that the aunt was just joking and that he did not intend not to marry. Chu looked at them in surprise, but in her heart she laughed wildly because she understood that this was what the villain needed. Cheng Qingyun looked at the young man in surprise, as she had called herself his fiancée for many years. But today was the first time he had disowned her in front of outsiders. At that very moment, he told the girl that he had things to do. He also said that she was weak and could not move much, so he would ask the driver to take her home. She smiled and said that she agreed. At that very moment, Cheng Qingyun said with a gentle smile that he should take care of himself and not make the same mistakes she made, while he casually said that he understood her. The young lady in turn understood that she was losing him, and at that very moment she cried out that she felt bad and that her heart hurt. Songchen was shocked at the same moment, rushed to her, and asked if she was okay. He said that if necessary, he would send her to the hospital with an assistant. Chu-Chu looked intently at the girl because she understood that this was very ridiculous on her part. Chung Ching-yun looked at her fiancé with tears in her eyes and said that she was afraid of injections and also asked if he could go with her. But at that very moment, they were both taken aback as they heard Chu-Chu's cry. Songchen immediately rushed to his daughter. He did not understand what had happened at all. Meanwhile, the young girl was screaming that her tummy hurt. He was shocked and shouted that she didn't need to be afraid, as he would take her to the doctor immediately. At that moment, he shouted to his assistant to quickly call a doctor. Shocked and not understanding what had happened, Songchen shouted that they should call the doctors from the medical department, their company. Songchen shouted in a hurry that Chu-Chu had a stomachache and that it might be appendicitis or diarrhea. But at the same moment, he glanced sideways at his so-called bride and suggested that perhaps it was food poisoning. As he left, he told his assistant to send the girl to a private hospital. Cheng Qingyun Wu must have been frozen in place, in shock for a moment. She didn't understand how such a thing could have happened. Cheng Qingyun was shocked because she knew that this was her chance to gain the man's sympathy, but the child ruined everything in an instant. She was puzzled because she knew that the girl was more important to him than her, even though she had a fatal illness. At the same time, the young lady hugged her father with tears in her eyes and said that she was in great pain. But at that very moment, she opened her eyes and looked at Chen with a satisfied grin, Qingyun. Cheng Qingyun was taken aback as she immediately realized that the girl was faking her illness. Cheng Qingyun was furious because she understood that a girl of that age already knew how to pretend. She realized that the person in front of her was simply a natural-born intriguer. She wanted to immediately find out what the girl really was, and if she posed a threat to her, she had to get rid of her. Chu-Chu looked at the girl with a smirk, as it seemed she didn't like this technique, but she used the same method against her that she once used against her mother. In the original story, Chen Qingyun masterfully acted out her attacks, each time creating misunderstandings between her mother and her grieving father. Chu-Chu looked at the girl with a fierce grin, as no one else knew how to pretend. Sometime later, the man informed his supervisor that the medics had already arrived. At that moment, he turned around and looked at his daughter. But a moment later, looking at the young girl, he noticed that she felt much better. He was taken aback and wondered if she was just pretending to be sick. At that very moment, he sighed heavily and told his subordinate to send the medics back. Songchen thought for a moment about how to properly raise a child if he pretended to be sick or lied. He knew that he needed to read a lot of books in order to understand the child. Songchen immediately approached his daughter and asked if she was pretending to be sick. She sighed heavily and said that it was true. Chu-Chu wanted him to notice it because this was the highest level of acting. Songchen looked at his daughter with all seriousness and said that pretending to be sick was bad, because in this way she made her mother and him worry. He did not understand why she did this. Chu-Chu said that she did not like the aunt who came to her uncle because she had a very evil look, more terrible than Snow White's stepmother, and therefore she was very afraid of her. Songchen told his daughter that his aunt was not like that and that she was very kind. He said that they had only just met and that she had no reason to treat her badly. Chu-Chu looked at him with a puzzled expression and asked why her aunt pretended to be sick when she and he had gone out together, and everything was fine. And she also looked at her with a very angry expression. Songchen froze for a moment because he knew that the girl was always obedient and gentle. He did not understand why Chu-Chu did not believe him. Songchen sighed heavily and said that he would deal with it later, but he also asked his daughter not to pretend to be sick anymore, even if she didn't like someone. She agreed with him, but also said that she still didn't like her aunt. She also said that she didn't want her aunt to be her uncle's bride, because she wanted her mother to be the bride. Songchen was taken aback and beamed with happiness as his dear daughter wanted her mother to marry him. Songchen asked with a happy smile if this was true. Chu-Chu said that it was true because her uncle treated her and her mother well. She loved him and wanted him to become her father. Songchen was very happy because he had put in the care and attention, and finally, he felt the fruits of his labors. He saw that his daughter did not want him to have another bride, so she pretended to be sick. At that moment, he hugged his daughter and said with a smile that she didn't need to worry, as he would protect her and her mother for the rest of their lives. Choo-Choo smiled and said that she wanted Uncle Song and Uncle Lou to protect her mother together. The man was taken aback when he heard about the director again. He looked at her with bewilderment and asked what Uncle Lou had to do with it. She smiled and said that they both treated her mother well, and she would like her mother to marry all the uncles. Choo-Choo said with a satisfied smile that Uncle Song would be the main dad, Uncle Lou would be the second dad, and Uncle Zhangqing would be the third dad. She knew that Zhangqi is not included in the list because he was young and has not yet been considered. Songchen immediately shouted to his daughter that her mother could only marry one man, and that would be him. He was shocked because he did not understand where his daughter got these frightening thoughts about several fathers. He was furious because he wanted to be the father of his daughter. He understood that this would not happen, and he would simply trample the man. Choo-Choo looked at her grieving father with a satisfied grin, since he just wanted her to forgive all his sins within a month. She knew very well how he actually offended her mother. She knew that he would gradually repay all his debts to her and his mother, at least until he himself saw the true face of his so-called bride. She had no intention of giving her mother into his hands. At that very moment, she sighed heavily and said that their family was very poor, so her mother was looking everywhere for ways to earn money, and every day she was so tired that she could hardly stand on her feet. Choo-Choo said with bitterness in her voice that when she was little, she was often sick, and one night there was a downpour, but there was no car, and her mother carried her on her back for several kilometers in the rain until she had bloody blisters. When her mother herself fell ill, she refused to go to the doctor and kept saying that she was fine. She knew that her mother was very tired, but she still loved her. Choo-Choo looked closely at her grieving father and said with tears in her eyes that she wanted the best mother in the world to protect as many people as possible. At that very moment, he sighed heavily and said that she was still a good daughter. The man was very angry with himself because he understood that his beloved had suffered a lot during these years of separation. He wanted to gradually prove to her that he was sincere and intended not to let her go and not to let her be offended. At the same time, the young lady was in the Cheng family's private hospital. Cheng Qingyun asked the doctor to check the girl's information since this hospital should have medical records about her. The doctor coldly replied that Choo-Choo was just an ordinary child. Cheng Qingyun shouted that she didn't think so because her fiancé had been paying too much attention to her, and she almost thought that the girl was actually his illegitimate daughter. Cheng Qingyun stubbornly insisted that she must marry her fiancé and enter his family, but she understood that everything had to go perfectly. Unfortunately, until the age of 10, the young lady lived in real slums. Wherever you looked, there was dirt, stench, and filth. But fortunately for her, fate was kind to hers. It turned out that her real father was the head of an influential family in the capital. She thought she would live like a princess in a fairy tale, but to her regret, she turned out to be just one of her father's many illegitimate children, and being illegitimate, they could not claim a share in the company, so everyone began to fight for the right of inheritance. She was angry because none of her relatives could defeat one person. He was the real elder heir of the Cheng family Qi. He is only 15 years old, but he has already subjugated almost the entire family with his cruelty. She had no desire to return to poverty, having already tasted wealth, and yet understood that there was no turning back. Cheng Qingyun was aware of the fact that she could not defeat her brother, but if she could marry the young man, she would be able to rise to the top. A few days later, the young man told his girlfriend that the director would like her to star in the film since the little actors were competing for the role, but everyone understood that she was better than them. Choo-Choo smiled and said that she would definitely try. She was a little puzzled since her mother had gone to filming a long time ago, and she already missed her, and besides, she knew that one of the villains in the original was also present on the set, and so she wanted to warn her mother to be careful around the woman. Manshi, looking at her mother, said that she was going to visit her beloved sister. She asked her mother if she wanted Lita to give her something. Madam said menacingly that her daughter had become famous and she could not reach her. Manshi said that her sister was very capable because she managed to quietly get under the director's wing. Madame told her daughter not to be like actors because they were noble people and she was just a clown and they were not on the same level. Manshi said with a grin that she could handle it and that her mother didn't need to worry because when she met her sister, she would definitely say a few kind words to her off. Sometime later, the young lady finally came to the set. She looked around as if she was looking for her sister, but at that very moment, she ran away because she heard a scream and saw the props of the cart, and it was rushing towards her. Manchi stood frozen for a moment, not knowing what to do. At that very moment, someone pulled her aside. The young man looked at the girl in surprise and asked what she was doing on the set. She was taken aback and immediately said that she was looking for someone. Manchi froze in place with embarrassment as she saw a handsome young man and wanted to know who he was. At that very moment, the young man told his colleague that the girl had sprained her ankle and he asked him to bring some ice. The man said that he would take care of the girl. At that very moment, he asked the girl with a smile to follow him. Manchi quickly turned around and asked the young man if her savior had a girlfriend. She also asked many questions that he could hardly answer. A moment later, she heard that the young man was an actor, and she was delighted with him and forgot about her true purpose. After some time, the young man slowly returned to the game of measure. But after a few minutes, the young lady transformed and took off her wig. The director looked at her closely and hurried her, as they had one more scene. He also said that she could change her clothes, as her scenes as a man had already been filmed. She was glad as she could go to the dressing room. The young man noticed that she looked convincing in a male image, and he said with a smile that if he were a girl, he would definitely fall in love. Fuquay immediately brought Manxi's younger sister into the dressing room and reported this to the director. She greeted the director with a smile as they had met unexpectedly. He sighed heavily and coldly replied that her sister was currently changing her clothes. He immediately glanced sideways at the girl and said that she was in the work zone and that she could not remain in it for long. Manchi did not pay attention to his words, and at the same moment, with a smile, asked about the young man who had saved her earlier, since she wanted to know his name and thank him personally. She wanted to know his name first, then his origin. She wanted to gradually get to know him and then develop a relationship with him. She understood that she was perfect in herself, and he would definitely fall in love with her. Fuquay thought for a moment, and after a few seconds began to describe the young man. She shouted that he should remember about the actor. He sighed heavily and said that it looked like the actor was just an extra. She sighed heavily as she realized that the young man was poor. She didn't care, but she understood that their statuses were too different, and her parents might be against it. At that very moment, she turned around because she heard a familiar voice and realized that it was the young man she liked. She happily entered the dressing room and said with a smile that she had come to him specifically to thank him. Manci turned around at that moment and asked her sister in surprise why she was in such a place. The young lady froze in place as she did not expect to see such a thing. At that very moment, the assistant director said with a smile that today her sister had a scene in a male guise, and it seemed that the girl had found her savior. Manchi was very angry at her sister. She did not understand why she saved her. She screamed that her sister treated her cruelly. Manchi ran away and shouted to her sister that she didn't want to see her anymore. Lu Shanhei asked his actress what happened to her sister, but she was puzzled, said that they knew what happened because her sister suddenly burst in and started screaming. At the same time, the young lady was in tears. She did not understand why her sister was in male form because she was damn attractive. She did not understand how something like this could happen because she fell in love with her at first sight in male form. Manchi was very upset because she simply fell in love with her sister. She screamed furiously that she didn't want to live anymore because she understood that if sister were to crumble on the concrete, she wouldn't be able to look people in the eyes. Manchi was puzzled because she understood that it was simply humiliating. But at the same moment, she wondered why she hated her sister at all because she had done nothing bad to her. Manchi asked herself if it really bothered her that her sister was more beautiful than her or that she got pregnant before the wedding. She froze and wondered if she had just been jealous of her sister all this time. Manchi turned around as she heard the dialogue between the young ladies who were criticizing the director's choice because he hadn't given the lead role to a great actress who had won many awards, but he had cast a girl who had left the film industry many years ago, and now no one needed her. They said that she simply seduced him because he was a man and succumbed to temptation. At Manchi looked at the girls with fury. She did not understand how they dared to insult her sisters. The girl told her friend with a smile, "Dirty secrets of show business." But at that very moment, Manchi intervened in the conversation of the young ladies and angrily asked if their heads weren't working. She shouted that it would be better if they first looked in the mirror and then said something. She shouted that the actress for the main role was very beautiful and talented. She would give a good performance in this role. The young girls looked at her with indignation and said that they could say whatever they wanted. They said that she had dressed herself so that it would seem that she wanted to seduce the director. Manchi shouted that she is beautiful, so she can dress according to her beauty. She also said that they are an actress, but she also told them that the owner of this film industry was her friend, and she had already taken their photos. Manchi said that if they continued to talk nonsense, she would immediately send him the pictures. But if they wanted to stay in the industry, they should shut their mouths. The young girls were taken aback and immediately left her. Manchi, looking after them, shouted that they were shameless because all they could do was spread rumors behind their backs. At that very moment, I turned around as I heard some kind of rumble behind me. Everyone present on the set was surprised by the talent of the main character, and they said that she played better than actresses with multiple awards. Manchi was taken aback when she saw her sister, but everyone praised and applauded her because she played so well. Manchi looked at her sister in shock, and she understood that she was very bright and not so nasty, and what her mother told her was not true at all. At the same time, the young lady thanked her little brother for accompanying her mother. He smiled and said that she should not worry too much about Xiaozhou, who had a stomachache, since he had already sent a doctor to him. Chuchu saw that he was a young man. He was very reliable, because as soon as he found out that Xiaozhou was bad, he immediately came to her. She assumed that he would do everything to meet her mother. She was a little puzzled and surprised since he was young, and already managed the affairs of the company, and at the same time fought off a bunch of greedy, illegitimate brothers. She understood that if he had not been cruel, he would not have survived. She learned that you are an original story. He died young due to the insidious plans of his rivals. At that very moment, she looked at the young man and said that he needed to be more careful. Chuchu said that she heard from her uncle that his father had many illegitimate children and that they were all plotting against him, and she also said that if anything happened, he should tell her right away because she was strong and could protect him. He looked at her with a gentle smile and said that she did not need to worry, as they would not do anything to him. He also asked her to save her strength so that she could protect herself. Chuchu smiled and said that she agreed, and in that case they could deal with all the villains together. Changqi said with a smile that they would do so. He thanked her mentally, as he knew that she knew that a terrible fate awaited him in the original, and now she was trying to save him. But he understood that they would not allow a tragic ending this time. Sometime later, the young lady ran to her mother with a smile and asked in a playful manner who had come to see her. A moment later, the young lady was finally seen through. Chuchu looked at her mother with a tender smile as she increasingly realized how good it was to have such a mother, because in her past life, she had no parents. But in this life, her mother gave her all the love. Lu Shanhe looked at the girl with a smile and said that they would soon have an audition, and several more children her age would come, because they also applied for this role. He smiled and said that despite his affection for her in acting skill remained the deciding factor, so he would not single out anyone, and she needed to try to play well. She smiled and said that she knew it, and he didn't need to worry, because she was a natural-born actress. He smiled and said that he was glad to hear that. She wasn't interested in small roles at all, but she heard that Cao Yueji's 7-year-old niece would be coming to the audition. She wanted to stay at his studio for a few days to find out everything about the enemies. Changqi looked at the girl with a smile, because he knew that she really was a natural-born actress. At the same time, the girl told Meng Meng that she had to get this role no matter what. Meng Meng looked at her aunt with a smile and said that she would become a beautiful actress like her and would not disappoint her. She was happy when she heard praise for her aunt. Cao Weiji understood perfectly well that if her niece didn't get into the project, she would find another way to deal with the main star, because before she was the main star of the film set, and now everyone was only watching Songsis. Sometime later, the man announced with a smile that everyone was assembled, and that they would now begin the auditions. He informed all the children present that the scene took place on a battlefield with the girl's parents killed by enemies and her finding their bodies. He said that the wall and the lines could be improvised. At that very moment, looking at everyone present, he said that the most important thing is to show emotions and move the audience to tears. A moment later, he introduced the jury and told them that they did not need to worry, as the elders would judge them accordingly. Fuke looked at everyone present with a smile and asked who wanted to try first. At that moment, the girls rushed towards him. Chuchu was puzzled because there was so much noise around her, and she felt like she was back in that nightmare kindergarten. At that very moment, the young man handed her a glass of water with a smile and told her that she didn't need to be nervous. Ki smiled and said that she could drink a little to moisten her throat. She thanked him and began to drink the water. But at the same time, they were being closely watched from the side. Chao Yueji was surprised that the younger gentleman was next to the girl that the main character brought to her. She was furious because she understood that the actress's circle included many rich and influential men, and she even managed to seduce the young man. A moment later, active testing began. The young people watched everything that was happening closely. Fuque looked at the last participant with a smile. At that very moment, she approached the esteemed judges and greeted them and introduced herself. As soon as she was given the signal that she could begin, she immediately burst into tears and pitifully called for her parents. Chuchu walked past everything with tears in her eyes and looked for her parents. But moments later, she stopped as she saw her mother's hand under the rubble. She immediately rushed to her mother and sadly said that she wanted to eat. She wanted her mother to take her home. Everyone present froze in shock, and they simply could not believe that she was really 5 years old, since such a small child simply could not play so well. Chao Yueji was taken aback by the way the girl acted so convincingly. She wondered if children of that age could even act like that. She managed to evoke strong empathy in a simple scene. At that very moment, the young girls burst into tears and realized that she was a natural-born actress. At that very moment, the director shouted that they were casting Chuchu for the role. He also asked if anyone had any objections, but everyone shouted in one voice that she was simply amazing. Fuque burst into tears at this, as he was impressed by her performance. Fuque, bursting into tears, said that he was crying loudly, but the teacher was calm. But at that very moment, he was taken aback, as his teacher simply rushed past him. Fuque was shocked, and to his regret, he could not bear it, and fell to the ground with a crash. At that very moment, the director ran into the dressing room of his leading actress and shouted with a joyful smile that her daughter was a natural-born actress and a real genius. He shouted that he should think about her career as an actress because he intended to do everything possible to develop her talent. Mangxi was shocked by her teacher's behavior. She shouted for him to stop because she had never seen him so wound up before. Zhang Chung-sol said with a smile that the director was very excited because he had never seen anything like this before, as the girl showed not only childish naivety, but also the weight of the times. He understood that this was difficult, but she managed it. Mansi asked with a smile if she really had an innate talent. At that very moment, the director said that they could talk, and he would go on working. He joyfully shouted that tomorrow they intended to film a scene with a young actress, and he needed to prepare everything. He also asked the girl to think carefully about what he said. Mansi watched her teacher with a smile, because she knew that he was devoted to his work and did not even care about his health. The young man remarked that the director was born for cinema. At the same time, Chung-chi smiled and praised his friend because she played amazingly. She smiled and said that, of course, it was because she was a natural-born actress. He looked at her with a tender smile because he understood that her words were true, because in her past life, she often deceived him. And when he finally exposed all her masks and was ready to talk to her sincerely, the stone suddenly exploded and transferred him into a cruel romance. After a while, Mansi called her daughter with a joyful smile. She smiled and told her daughter that she had already finished work and that they could go for a walk in the evening. Mangxi looked at the young gentleman with a smile and thanked him for helping them a lot today. He smiled and said that there was nothing to thank him for, and he was also calm about Chuchu. But he also told Madam that if they needed anything, they could call him at any time. Mansi stared intently at the young master as she saw that he was truly a good man, and not at all as cold as they said about him. Chuchu looked at her mother with a smile and wondered if she could see that he was hitting on her. At that moment, the young lady told her aunt with a smile that Chuchu called the beautiful aunt his mother. Chao Yueji was taken aback and wondered if Mangxi had left the industry because of her pregnancy. She was puzzled because her friend had previously sent her a photo of the girl and asked her to find out a secret about her. She looked at them closely because she realized that everything was unimportant, but she now had dirt on her rival. At the same moment, she sent a photo of her friend and reported that her mother was Mangxi, but who her father was unknown. Chung Qingyun, in turn, was shocked by this news. At that moment, she was taken aback and wondered if the girl was really her fiancé's daughter. Chung Qingyun was furious, as she knew that such a thing simply couldn't happen, since she was the one who forced the girl to take the abortion pills before throwing her out. She screamed because she knew something like this simply couldn't happen, but at the same time, she asked her friend to get her a hair sample from the girl because she wanted to check her DNA. Chung Qingyun was angry. She understood that if the girl was really her fiancé's daughter, then she had to do something because only she was worthy of becoming the mistress of the great Song family. She understood that the girl just wanted to become famous at the expense of her child, but she understood that she would not allow her to do something like that. Some time later, the young lady was in full dress and getting ready for filming. But at the same time, everyone actively and joyfully admired her and also wanted to take a photo with her. Her mother was also not far removed from everyone else. Mansi looked at her daughter with admiration, as she was very cute. In turn, she sent photos of her daughter to all her loved ones, as she was very cute. But after a moment, she froze and wondered whether she should send the photo to the girl's father. But she still sent him the photo because she just couldn't resist. After some time, the young man looked at his phone with a smile as he received an SMS from his beloved. At that moment, he was taken aback and looked with admiration at the photo of his daughter in makeup. He looked at the photograph with admiration because he saw that his daughter was simply delightful, and he also noticed her beautiful dirty cheeks. But at that very moment, all his thoughts vanished as he was called. He sighed heavily and said that he had been thinking about it, so he asked the man to repeat the project plan. Mansi read the messages from her lover with a smile as he wrote that their daughter was as cute as she was, and he also said that he had sent her a treat. Chuchu looked at her mother with a gentle smile and said that she blushed a little. She ran away and said that it was just hot in the room. At that moment, she told her daughter that they should go because she wanted to show her the film set. Chuchu agreed with her mother, but at that very moment, Chuchu noticed that her mother and her hapless father were gradually improving their relationship, but she understood that until she got rid of her father's fiancé, her mother should not think about marriage. She wanted her mother to focus on her career and making money now. Moments later, Anna saw her savior and joyfully greeted him. Zhang Qi reported that his wounds had already healed, and he was now filming again. And he also thanked her for often visiting him in the hospital. Tao Yueji immediately greeted the man with a grin. Chuchu looked angrily at the vile villainess. Tao Yueji ran up to the girl with a joyful smile, and at that very moment said that filming would begin soon, and she must not let the director down. She reached out to Chuchu because she wanted to take a DNA sample for her friend, but the young lady immediately realized what she wanted to do and immediately pushed her away so that she would not ruin the makeup because the director would be upset. Chuchu looked at the woman with a grin because she understood what she was up to, but she didn't know who she wanted to do it for. Chao Yueji looked at the girl with a smile and said that she was very cute, so she wanted to touch her. But at that very moment, the director called the young lady, and the madame was taken aback as she had not been able to do what she wanted. As she ran away, the young lady said goodbye to her aunt. Chao Yueji was furious because she didn't succeed, but she knew that as long as the girl was participating in the filming, she still had a chance. Chuchu looked askance at the woman because she knew that it didn't matter what she had in mind. She had attacked the wrong person. After some time, Mansi told her daughter that she had to go to filming and that she would stay with her uncle for now. Zhang Xi looked at the girl with a smile and said that the beautiful sponsor had bought ice cream for the entire film crew. He asked what kind of ice cream she wanted because he wanted to bring her some too. She asked him with a smile to bring vanilla ice cream. He smiled and said that he would bring it, but she should sit still and not go anywhere. Chao Yueji approached her again and looked at the girl with a smile. Chao Yueji reached out to the young lady and said that she had a very beautiful cap and she would like to take a closer look. Chuchu saw that the woman was just like chewing gum. She immediately pulled away from the woman and said with a timid smile that her cap was pinned on, so she couldn't take it off. Chao Yueji smiled and said that she really wanted to try it on and take a closer look, but the young lady refused her with a happy smile. Chao Yueji was very angry and puzzled. She knew that she wanted a few of the girl's hairs, but she guessed that the girl was suspicious of her and was suspicious. Chao Yueji was very upset because she understood that she did not want to be a secondary character at all, and now at the request of her friend, she had to take care of the child. At that very moment, she looked menacingly at the girl and threateningly told her to give her the cap back immediately, but the young lady also firmly replied that she would give it back. Choo-Choo wondered if she was going to use force on her, but she knew that it would be a very good idea. After all, she hadn't hit people for a long time, and now she would practice again. But at that very moment, a young lady came up to them and said with a grin, "Was it really their great actress who had run around the children again?" Ye Qianqian looked at the woman intently and said that she had not changed at all, because as before, she mocked the weak and feared the strong. Chao Yueji looked at the young lady intently, as she did not expect to see her at all. Chao Yueji said with a smile that she noticed the insects on the hat and wanted to just remove them, but she didn't want to scare the girl at all. Ye Qianqian said with a smile that she shouldn't pretend. In this century, her acting is as disgusting as her character. Choo-Choo was shocked by what she heard, but in turn, she liked what the young actress said. Chao Yueji screamed furiously at the young girl, asking her who she thought she was, since she wasn't fit to hold a candle to her. She screamed that the director had failed her audition, and now she was begging him to give her the role. Ye Qianqian said with a satisfied smile that she was not going to beg him for the role as the woman had done, since the director had personally invited her to record the advertising song. Chao Yueji was burning with anger and fury, but she did not respond. At that moment, she turned away from them, and as she left, said that she did not want to talk to her. Ye Qian. Qian mocked the great actress for a while before leaving. Choo-Choo looked closely at her Zirogita, as she was a popular star and a very rare, sincere, and honest girl. She knew that there were few like her in the entertainment industry, but unfortunately, she remembered that because of her character, the girl eventually found herself in a deplorable situation. When Zhang Qi was boycotted because of false accusations, she defended him, and as a result, her career went downhill. Later, due to a confrontation with the popular star Cao Yiji, she lost her voice, and since then, she has disappeared from the screens. But the young lady was glad that she still had time left. At the same time, Ye Qianqian looked at the girl with a smile and asked, "Is she really that cute child who defeated the actress Cao Yueji's niece?" Choo-Choo greeted the young girl with a joyful smile. Ye Qianqian, without wasting a moment, smilingly told the little girl to stay away from that woman, as she was selfish and evil. Choo-Choo said with a smile that she understood everything, and also asked the girl if she was really looking for someone. Ye Qianqian said with a smile that she just decided to take a walk. She also said that she heard that Zhang Qi was on the set. She asked the girl if she had seen him. Choo-Choo smiled and said that he went to get ice cream and would be back soon. She knew that the man was married and much older than her, and he was not at all as handsome. She did not know what the girl wanted from him. At that moment, a man approached them and greeted the young lady. Zhang Qi looked at the girl with a smile and said that his scene was coming up soon and he needed to go get ready, but at the same time, he wanted to take her to the set to find her mother. She smiled and agreed. Ye Qianqian? At the same time, she told the teacher with a smile that she really liked watching him act in martial arts, and therefore she would like to go to the set with them. He said with a smile that she could go with them. At the same time, Choo-Choo was watching them closely. Fuqui looked at the man and told him what he needed to do in the new scene. Choo-Choo knew that in the original, the man was injured during filming, and then quickly became the subject of a cheating scandal. She knew that in the story, he was injured at that very moment. At that moment, she told her mother with a smile that she would go and watch her uncle film a scene and then come back to hers. Choo-Choo knew very well that there were too many people there, and one of them would set Zhang up Qi. At that very moment, she ran up to the man and asked in bewilderment why ropes were being tied to him. He smiled and said that they tie ropes so that he can fly. Ye Qianqian smiled and said that with them, you can jump from great heights and not get hurt. She also said that the man never used stunt doubles in fight scenes, and that was very cool. Choo-Choo looked at the thin rope with puzzlement and asked what would happen if it broke. She saw that it was very thin, and at first glance, it was not noticeable that there was anything wrong with it. The young man looked at the girl with a smile and asked her not to worry. He said that he had been checking ropes for the film crew for many years, and they were regularly replaced, and for many years there had not been a single accident. She excitedly asked if this was true. She sighed because she knew that he was too naive, because unlike him, she knew the plot, so she wanted to do something secretly. At that moment, she said with a smile that the rope was really strong, and therefore she didn't need to worry. After some time, the first testing of the site took place. They lifted the man up and watched closely everything that was happening. But a few minutes after they picked him up, he noticed something was wrong. At that very moment, he cried out in embarrassment that they should stop as his pants were falling down, and it seemed that he had not tightened his belt properly. Everyone present burst out laughing and said that they would bring him down right away. But a moment later, the rope broke and the man fell down. A few seconds later, he fell with a thud onto the firm mattress. Ye Qianqian hurriedly shouted and called her teacher. At that moment, everyone quickly rushed towards the man. Chu-Chu looked closely at the ropes, because it happened just as she expected. They quickly lifted him up, and at that very moment, the director ran up to them as he did not understand what had happened. At that very moment, he shouted to his subordinate to immediately inform the medical team, and he also said that they immediately needed to close the site and remove outsiders so that they could check the equipment. The young man was taken aback and told the director that there were ropes before the inspections began. But as soon as the man stood up, the rope suddenly broke. Fuqui informed the director at the same moment that something was wrong because there were several even cuts on the rope and they were cut artificially. He also reported that the actor's pants began to fall down and they stopped him at a low height. But if he had fallen at a high height, he would have definitely broken something. At that very moment, the director turned purple with rage. He immediately shouted that they should immediately check all the equipment, and if necessary, they could order new ones. But they must keep it a secret, and they must report that they were just taking a break. At the same time, Song Chen was hurriedly getting ready and talking with his subordinate. He looked at his grandson menacingly and asked what was going on between him and the guy from the Liu family, since he made the assistant send things to the set from time to time, and he himself often went there. He said the company was heavily invested in the film project, and he needed to monitor its progress. The man looked at his grandson with anger and told him not to lead him by the nose and to tell everything as it is because he had seen a lot in his life. He said that over the years, he had introduced his grandson to the daughters of different families, but he had not fallen in love with any of them, and even that bride was just a distraction. Song Chen sighed heavily and told his grandfather that he was very wise. His engagement was actually just a temporary measure, and he agreed to be engaged to his girlfriend in order to thank her, and also to avoid endless blind dates. The old man sighed heavily and said with a puzzled expression that the director was young talented, and that his role in the film was quite interesting, and that he had thought about it for a very long time. At that very moment, he could not stand it, and told his grandson that if he liked the director, he would accept their relationship. The young man was taken aback, as he did not expect to hear anything like that at all. But at that very moment, he could not stand it, and asked his grandfather, embarrassed what he was saying, while he was shouting that he was not at all interested in the directors. Song Chen immediately shouted and told his grandfather that he didn't like the director at all. The old man sighed heavily and told his grandson that he would not distract him from his work. He also said that he would have an anniversary very soon, and he would send an invitation to the director. He also said that his grandson could cancel the marriage if he did not love the girl. Song Chen was puzzled and didn't understand what was going on at all, since his grandfather didn't give him a chance to say a word. He knew that he would have to bring his daughter to his grandfather's birthday party to calm him down. At the same time, the young lady was sitting quietly in the hotel, but she was immersed in her thoughts and looking for information about who did this to her savior. But a moment later, she was taken aback as she heard a knock on the new door. A few minutes later, she opened the door and asked the woman if she was looking for someone. Xiao Suze looked at the girl in surprise and asked who she was. And she also said that she was looking for Zhang Qi, since he was her son-in-law. But at the same time, she did not understand why the girl was in his room. Xiao Suze looked at the girl with a fierce grin and wondered if the man had really hidden from her sister that he had taken a mistress and even had an illegitimate daughter. At that very moment, she was so happy as she realized that she had arrived on time. Chu-Chu looked at the woman intently as she knew that the plot had moved on and that her savior would soon be in trouble. At that very moment, she smiled and told her aunt that her son-in-law was living in another room and she had simply made a mistake. She also said that he was still filming and would return late. Xiao Suzy sighed heavily as she realized that she had simply hoped in vain. She looked casually at the girl and left. Chu-Chu stared at her as if she knew she was not simple, because in the novel, she accidentally ended up in bed with Zhang Qi, and the paparazzi caught them, after which he lost his reputation and slid from the heights of fame to the very bottom. and eventually he died from overwork. After some time, she finally met her son-in-law, Xiaosu's, told her son-in-law with a smile that she had a TV series shoot scheduled for the next day and had been given a small role. She asked if he could come and watch, but he said that he was filming, but he would still try to find time for her and drop by. Xiaosu's, with a satisfied smile, told her son-in-law that he was cool because he got a role from the best director, and her sister made the right choice because she married such a wonderful man. He smiled sheepishly and said that a man should earn money and take care of his family, but unfortunately, he was not at home for an hour, and she had to carry everything on her own. Xiaosu said with a smile that her son-in-law was very caring, and at the same time she reached out to him as she noticed sauce on the corner of his lips. He moved away from her and said that she needed to give it to her, and that she had to leave him soon since she had a shoot tomorrow and she needed to rest. Xiaosu's was a little confused, as he was impenetrable, but she had set up cameras and all their moments were already recorded. She was already coming up with a headline for the article about a famous action star meeting with a lady late at night. At the same time, the young lady was watching them closely as she found unknown cameras. She understood that the wife's younger sister did not come for no reason. Chu understood perfectly well that it was time for her to act. At that very moment, she contacted her fellow hackers. But at the same time, she was informed that they were invited to a hacker tournament in the States. And the leader of one of the organizations invited some to join them, and this organization was called Poker. She was shocked and wondered if there really was a poker organization in this world. Chu was puzzled, as she had been in this world for several years, and had not noticed the existence of this organization. In her past life, her hacker organization was called Poker. She and Old Man Mo started together, step by step, turned it into a worldwide network. But later, the old man mysteriously disappeared, and she had to come out of the shadows to find him. She knew that before he disappeared, the old man was looking for some special stone, and it was because of this stone that she suddenly found herself in a new world. Chu knew that she needed to go abroad because she intended to expose the true face of the secret organization. At that moment, all her thoughts disappeared as she saw her mother, and she was wondering why her daughter was not sleeping. She smiled and said that she was waiting for her mother to return. Mansi apologized to her daughter as she had paid little attention to her, as she had been very immersed in work. Chu said with a smile that it was okay, because her mother was now a superstar and she was very happy about it. Manxi smiled at her daughter and said that she was praising her too much. Manxi said with a smile that Uncle Song would come tomorrow and help her with her summer assignments, so she should be smart. Chu was shocked because she knew it was summer vacation, and she was confused that she was given boring kindergarten homework. The next day, the young man came to his daughter. He was glad that his beloved called him to help his daughter with the homework. He knew that his daughter would not run away and should sit and write. At that moment, she called him, but he firmly said that she could not leave the room because her mother said that first she needed to do math and Chinese, and then she could rest. Chu looked at the young man intently and said that she would like something to drink and asked him to go with her to get some juice. He was taken aback as her gaze pierced his heart. At that very moment, they abandoned the entire task and set out to search for the juice. Chu looked at her grief-stricken self with a contented smile as she realized that he had changed a lot. But she also knew that while there was an opportunity, she could only keep an eye on the boiled woman because she felt that the lady was up to something bad. Chu entered the hall with her father. She knew that Xiaosu's wasn't involved in the filming and didn't show up on set, so she assumed she was up to something. A moment later, she finally found the lady. At that very moment, she told her grief-stricken father where they could sit. The waiter approached them and with a smile apologized for her warm welcome and also asked what they would like to order. He asked his daughter with a smile what she wanted to choose. A moment later, the young lady had chosen everything she wanted. The waiter told the gentleman with a smile that he would take care of the order, and if they had any other requests, they should let him know and he would fulfill everything. Songchen was talking to his lover at the same time. He told her that their daughter had finished math, and he decided to take her out for a bite to eat. She thanked him with a smile for his concern, and at the same time, her father, who was awkwardly texting her mother, was staring at her while she was eating. She sighed heavily, because she knew that men in love always behaved like idiots. At that very moment, she turned on the wiretap, and while drinking juice, listened to what Xiao was saying. Sue's Gavrila was on the phone with her sister. Her sister was saying that her daughter was already 6 years old, and soon everyone would see that she was not like her father, so they had to do something quickly. Xiao Suzy said with a smirk that her brother-in-law would finish filming today, and she would put sleeping pills in his soup. She told her sister not to worry about it, since no one would know about it. Chuchu was surprised by what she heard, but she understood that they wanted to disgrace her savior, and they were preparing a setup. At that moment, Song Chen looked at his daughter in surprise and asked why she ordered so much ice cream. He said her mother told him she was only allowed 1 day at most. The young lady, in turn, was furious. She understood that her grief-stricken father had fallen under her mother's thumb. She understood that he was not the president of a great company at all, since he couldn't even give his daughter ice cream. At that very moment, he looked at her and said that he would like to talk to her about what he said that this year his grandfather had an anniversary. He asked his daughter if she wanted to meet him. Choo-choo. It was a moment of comfort to hear something like that. She knew that in the original, he was one of the few who treated her mother well, because he saw right through people. But on his anniversary, Qing Qingyun Taino damaged his wheelchair, causing the wheelchair to lose control and crash into a column, resulting in the old man's tragic death. She was furious because she knew she had to keep an eye on the girl. At that very moment, she smiled and told her father that she would like to see her grandfather. But a moment later, a young lady approached them and looked at the president in surprise. She smiled and introduced herself, and also said that her son-in-law was an action star from his company. She said that she was very glad to see him, as he was even more handsome than they said. At that very moment, he was taken aback and stood up as he was surprised that his daughter was suddenly going somewhere. She said that she would like to call her mother. Choo-choo said that he was talking nicely with this aunt, and she felt like she was the odd one out, so she would call her mother to pick her up because she didn't want to disturb them. He was shocked and didn't expect this. He shouted at his daughter to come back, but Xiaosu stopped him. She looked at him with a smile and said that she was also an actress. She smiled timidly and asked if she could take the opportunity to ask him for a few pieces of advice. But at that very moment, he angrily pushed her away and shouted at her to get out immediately. Song Chen ran after his daughter with lightning speed, leaving the girl behind. She was in shock because she understood that everything was lost. She completely forgot that the director had a mania for cleanliness and that he could not be touched. She was imprisoned because she did not understand why he cared about the girl. But at that very moment, she beamed with happiness because her son-in-law called her. She said that they were already dying of hunger and invited him to go to a restaurant in the evening. That same evening, the young people met and happily began to have dinner. Choo-choo sighed heavily, and while eating, asked her mother what it meant to be caught cheating. At that moment, the young people were dumbfounded because they were shocked by her question. Mansi looked intently at her lover, but at that very moment, he began to shout that he had not taught her this at all, and that he had simply been set up. Mansi, looking at her daughter, asked where she heard it, because it was a very bad word. She said that when she was waiting for her mother in the hall, she drank a lot of water and went to the toilet. She said that there was an aunt there talking on the phone and saying that the paparazzi had come and would catch someone cheating, and that today they would go to Uncle Jang's room, and when he is caught, she will get a lot of money. Looking at her parents, she said that the girl also said that her uncle would throw himself into the river to wash away the shame. Choo-choo looked at her mother intently and asked if her savior would really throw himself into the river. Mansi quickly stood up and said that she would go look for her friend, and in the meantime, he should look after his daughter. He sighed heavily and said that she had no evidence, only the child's words. She was shocked and asked what she should do because she could not watch as he was being set up. At that moment, Song Chen told his daughter that they would be gone for a while and that the nanny would come to her soon. He asked her not to run away and wait for them. She was glad that in such moments, her pseudo-daddy was reliable. Song Chen took his lover's hand and said that they should first go to the room with the cameras, because if someone had set up a setup, there should be some traces. Mansi agreed with him, but at the same time, she was confused by his approach. At the same time, Xiaosuz, with a satisfied smile, informed her brother-in-law that her sister had told him to improve his health every day, and so she had brought him chicken broth from home. He asked her to put the broth in the refrigerator, and he would drink it after filming. Xiaosuz insistently said that he should drink it while it was hot, but at that moment, the man was taken aback as he saw that Mansi had called him late in the evening. He informed his relative that he would step away for a minute, as he needed to answer. She smiled and said that he should come back soon. She knew that today, no matter what she had to make him drink the broth. This dish had a dance in it. She knew that if he drank it, he would pass out within half an hour, and then she would just climb into bed with him and call her sister so that they would be caught in the act. A moment later, he came out, and she asked with a smile who had called him since they had been chatting for so long. He said coldly that a colleague on the set had called him, and they were discussing tomorrow's filming. At the same moment, he coldly told the young lady that it was already late and she should go and rest. She smiled and said that she agreed, but also asked him to drink the broth and regain his strength, as they were very worried about him. He immediately looked at her and asked if he had to drink the broth. Xiaosu's persistently asked them if he would neglect the care of his wife. She said that he was the support of the family and they should take care of him. He sighed heavily and said that he would drink it all now. At the same moment, she watched with a fierce grin as he drank the broth, which contained a sleeping pill. A moment later, she looked at him with joy and said that they only wanted the best for him. As she left, she wished her son-in-law a good rest. At that very moment, she sent her sister a text message that the fish had been caught. Jiangqi looked after her with a puzzled expression as he understood that they had prepared a betrayal for him. Jiangqi quickly got rid of all the contents in his stomach. He was puzzled and remembered the words of his colleague on the set that his sister-in-law was going to set him up. She said that he should under no circumstances drink anything from her. He was shocked as he knew that she had always treated him well. Mansi insisted that he should believe her because she was telling the pure truth, and she said that they had already found evidence that she wanted to put him in jail along with the operations. She also said that such schemes are not uncommon in show business. Unfortunately, she once drank water with sleeping pills and accidentally ended up in Sun Chen's room, and he thought that she just wanted to sleep with him for the sake of her career. Song Chen told the man that he had a recording of their conversation and that this was not the first time they had betrayed him. He also said that his people would come for him soon, and he only had to wait half an hour and then they would find out the truth. Song Chen told the man that if everything that happened turned out to be a mistake, he would compensate him. Jiangqi puzzledly agreed with them. That same evening, Xiaosu's quietly made her way into her son-in-law's room. She hoped that he would not blame her because he should blame himself, as he was stupid but rich. She understood that such a person did not need so much money. At that very moment, Xiaonan screamed and called for her husband throughout the entire corridor. She said that she was sitting at home with the child while he was going out to see women. She was angry and screamed at him to open the door immediately. But at that very moment, Xiaosu's opened the door and looked at them in surprise, and also asked what they were doing in such a place. Xiaonan, with tears in her eyes, asked her sister how she could do such a thing to her. At that very moment, the girl rushed to her sister and said that her brother-in-law had forced her. She said that if she had refused him, he would have kicked her out of show business, and she was simply wrong. At that very moment, the men rushed into the young man's room and began to shout and call him with rage. They shouted at him to stop pretending and get up immediately. At that moment, the man looked at them in surprise. Everyone present was taken aback, as they did not understand who was in front of them, since they expected to see their relative. Xiaonan was taken aback and asked in confusion where her husband was. Her sister was also stunned by everything that was happening. She said that he should have been in bed because she slept with him. At the same moment, they turned around as they heard the noise. Jiangqi apologized to the young man for disturbing him, but he asked him to take the child to the principal. He looked at her menacingly and asked where she thought he should be. She smiled and said that he was just a scoundrel because she was looking for him everywhere. She also said that it was all her fault because she was too jealous and almost made a scandal. She hoped that he did not understand anything, but at that very moment he pulled away from her and said that she should no longer call him her husband as she made him sick. He approached his former relative and said that he always took care of her as his younger sister, while he gave her money and helped her with his contracts. Jiangqi S. looked at the girl with anger as she had set him up. He asked menacingly if this was really how she had decided to repay him for all his kindness. She was taken aback and shouted that it was just a misunderstanding. She was shocked because she knew that he was their source of money and they could not lose him. She was taken aback and wondered what she should do in this situation. She said that it was all her fault. She immediately shouted that she was jealous because she saw how he loved her sister, and she wanted to ruin everything. She shouted that he was very good, and she wanted to be near him. Xiao Nan immediately asked her husband for forgiveness, since she loved him too much, and said stupid things in a heated manner. Xiao Su's sister said it was all her fault. At that very moment, the men intervened in their conversation and asked Zhang Qi, let go of this situation, since they still had a family and a child together. Xiao Nan looked at her husband with a smile, as she hoped that he would forgive her. But the man could not stand it, and with rage asked, did a good man really deserve to be used? He shouted. Xiao Su's screamed that she spent hundreds of thousands on his wedding while she rode in his cars, and he also spent a lot of money on her exquisite outfits. But at that very moment, he approached his dearly beloved wife and shouted. He was furious because he found out that she had given birth to another man's child, and he had raised him as his own all this time, and she had not even thanked him once. Everyone present froze in shock, as they did not expect him to find out about everything. Xiao Suzy froze in place. She didn't understand how he found out, but she knew one thing, that they were finished. At that very moment, his wife shouted that he was talking nonsense because she had risked her health to bear a child, and he was now saying that the child was not his. At that very moment, the man said that she had to listen to something. He played her a recording of a conversation where she and her sister discussed her child, who did not look like her husband, since it was not his, and their plan to set him up. At that very moment, he pushed her away and said that he would file for divorce, but the lawyer would count everything down to the last penny, and all their dirty deeds would be exposed. He said that they would not receive a single penny from him. Xiao Nan was furious and shouted that they would not get a divorce. She shouted that she had stooped so low as to marry him when he was miserable and poor, and now that he had money, he had decided to leave her. She screamed that they should talk it out, but she also screamed that he deserved her cuckolding him. Zhang Xi was furious and didn't understand how they could be so vile. He understood that if it weren't for the warning from his colleague and the support of the director, he would have truly fallen into their trap. He was even afraid to imagine how it could all end. The next day, her young lady quietly read an article about a famous action actor officially announcing his divorce, and his ex-wife being suspected of fraud and under investigation. She was glad that she had copies of all the documents, since she sent them to journalists, and they sent them to her grieving father. She knew that only with ironclad evidence would they pin the blame on the guilty and help her savior. She knew that in the novel, a sad and miserable death awaited him, but she was glad that nothing like that happened. Chu knew she wasn't the best person before, but she would never let a good person die because of such vile people. The next day on the set, the director yelled at the actress because due to Togo not being able to give it her all they had to film in the rain all day, Mansi, caring about her colleague, handed her a blanket and said that she should not worry about the director's words, since he was just a character. She thanked her for her concern. Mansi looked at her colleague intently and said that she was probably just tired and therefore should rest since filming was finished for today. Cao Yueji thanked her again and said that she would try to rest. Cao Yueji froze for a moment because she heard that everyone present was discussing her specifically because they could not film one scene for a long time, but they also said that Mansi was very patient and kind, and she also acted better. Cao Yueji was furious because she knew that the girl was deliberately outplaying her to look better in comparison to her. She understood that she would not forgive her for such a thing. Cao Yueji was immediately taken aback because she saw that Director Wang had called her again, and he had already invited her to join them several times. But he was disgusting and vile, and she felt sick from him, so she rejected his offer. The assistant director said that if Zhang Cheng did not renew the contract, they would urgently need to find a financial replacement. He sighed heavily and said that he knew about this and would lure the girl to their company at any cost. He said with a fierce grin that they would act covertly, and he also ordered his assistant to send their people to the film crew, as he intended to knock the great actress off her pedestal. He knew that when she fell on her face, she would crawl to him on her knees. That same evening, Song Chen looked at his daughter closely and asked her to put down the phone, but she said that she was texting with brother Chung Chi. He was surprised. Chu smiled and said that he was very sweet. He always helped her when she had problems, so she adored him. By problems she meant crafts for school because she dumped them on him. Song Chen asked his beloved if she thought the young man had his eye on their daughter. Manxi was shocked by such an assumption. She said that they were just children and were friends with each other. Song Chen sighed heavily and said that it was unlikely because their family was a den of predators and he knew that the young man was still too young, but he was already cunning beyond his years. Manxi smiled and said that it seemed that he was recording everyone you kidnappers. Songchen looked at his beloved intently and said that they must take care of their daughter. Mansi started coughing very hard. The man quickly approached her and asked what had happened. Mansi sighed heavily and said that she probably just caught a cold when she got caught in the rain. He said that he would immediately call a doctor, but she assured him that it was nothing, and after she took some pills, everything would go away. After some time, she finally took the medicine. Chen looked at her closely and said that she should sleep, but if she got worse, they would immediately call a doctor. She looked closely at her lover and asked him to look after her daughter. He sighed heavily and said that she did not need to worry because now she was the main patient. Chen's daughter said that she should give her mother a rest. She agreed with him, and he also said that she should put the phone away. Mansi in turn stared after them as she understood that things couldn't have been better. After all, 6 months ago, when she was sick, she had no one and didn't even have money for treatment. She was spinning around between part-time jobs to pay the rent, and now she saw that her daughter had everything. She was glad that her father had returned and she had started doing her business again. She was glad that fate had changed for her, and every day she felt better and better. So she now understood what true happiness was. The next day, after a short conversation, they began rehearsals. Manxi looked at her colleague with a smile and asked how she was feeling, since she also got wet yesterday. Manxi hoped that her colleague was not sick, since Cao Yueji said with a smile that she was strong, and the rain was nonsense since she even went to the gym. Manxi said with a smile that this was excellent. Cao Yueji in turn was puzzled and understood that her colleague was simply mocking her because she was pretending to be sick. At that very moment, the director looked at her and said that she should learn naturalness from her colleague. And he also said that they would begin filming in half an hour. Cao Yueji glared at her colleague angry because she knew that she was as stiff as wood next to her. After some time, they managed to film several episodes. The director looked closely at Cao Yueji and praised her for her good work today. Cao Yueji was happy because it was the first time the director spoke to her so softly. She understood that it was not in vain that she spent the whole night working on the script. As he left, the director smiled and told Cao Yueji that she needed to communicate more with Manxi as she felt her character more deeply. Cao Yueji was stunned by the producer's words as she understood that she was still a zero to him. Some time later, she was sitting in the dressing room and preparing for the next scene. The girl told the actress with a smile that she had played great today. She also smiled and said that Cao Yueji almost overshadowed the main character. Cao Yueji was offended by such words and immediately threw the bottle of water, which broke with a loud crash, and also told the girl to leave. Cao Yueji was furious and didn't understand why everyone was crazy about Manxi. She screamed and asked if she was worse than Manxi. At that very moment, the girl asked for forgiveness and hurried out of the dressing room. Cao Yueji froze for a moment as she heard what was said about her after what happened, and that she was called a queen, but she played poorly and yelled at others. They said that the film's main character, while sick, behaved much better and even played better. Songchen came to his beloved that same day and presented her with warm porridge with a smile as he wanted to take care of her while she was sick. The girl was taken aback and told the young man that she would eat herself and did not need to be fed. He insistently said that in that case, she should eat more. Songchen said that she had hardly slept and had spent the whole day on the court. He said that he had brought her some delicious broth to help her regain her strength. Cao Yueji was taken aback and froze in shock when she heard their conversation. She knew that the sponsor was sitting next to the actress, and now she had all the leading roles. Cao Yueji was frozen in shock because she did not know what she would get now, and therefore she assumed that it was time for her to leave. Cao Yueji. At that moment, she heard Manxi say that it was time for her to leave because Chu-Chu was waiting for her at the hotel. But the man said that the nanny would look after her and they could continue their date. Songchen said with a smile that he was happy to spend time with his daughter. Cao Yueji was taken aback at the same time and remembered that her colleague had a daughter. She realized that Manxi had deceived him and said that the child was the housekeeper's. She understood that the man knew nothing about her daughter. Cao Yueji looked into the distance with fury, as she knew that she would soon prepare a gift for her colleague. Sometime later, she finally contacted the director of the van company. He happily greeted her and also asked when they could meet in person and discuss the contract. She said that she was in no hurry to meet because she needed to finish something on the set.